2025 Meet State of Play. Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and joining me for a monumental 2025 episode where we apparently see State of Play take over the PlayStation, what were they calling it for a while? The
Showcase?
The Showcase. Yeah, the Showcase. Joining me is Mr. Chris Figs, as you all love and know him. Maybe you don't love him, but you know him at the very least. Figs, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Don't tell me if you don't love me. I don't need to know.
Just keep it quiet.
I've already been told that by one person this year. I don't need to hear it again.
Damn. That's rough. But this year, like 2025 calendar year, or just year in total?
This is she's still an ongoing issue in my life, and I don't talk to her, so it's great.
Chris,
it's wonderful.
Chris, lovely. Okay, well, you know what, Chris, we're going to pull you completely away from that.
I need the distraction. The knives are next to me, so let's just go.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been playing this week, or since last episode. We're not going to spend as much time on that. We are starting later because we delayed recording in order to have an episode where we primarily are focusing on the State of Play that just came today, February 12th, 2025, and brought with it a host of games. I mean, really, this thing was a lot more dense and jam-packed than I anticipated, even though the time limit they set should have made me more aware. Yeah. When we get to talking about our predictions, I think you'll see that I did expect a lot. I didn't expect quite this much. But before we get there...
believe that the Bloodborne 40 FPS patch and not a PS5 version was announced there?
There's a lot of things I can't believe, Chris. And we'll talk about those shortly. Chris, start me off on your side. There's one, before we do that, actually, I'm going to go ahead and say, we're going to talk about the fact, and I think it's probably going to creep up in this conversation because of how it may have impacted our ability to play. There's like a pygmy elephant in the room. It's not a huge one. PSN was down for roughly 16 hours. And people thought World War III had started, apparently. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, what that means, and our own opinions on the response from Sony and consumers both, or at least, I don't want to say consumers, fanatics online, and some more well-hearted, well-meaning people. So yeah, we'll get to talking about that in the long run. But Chris, start me off right, What have you been playing? We're not even running off of a document like we usually do. So I really have. I know one thing you've been playing, but if you're the Chris I know well,
yeah,
you couldn't keep yourself from playing just one thing. So prove me wrong. I'm ready to hear it.
So, bitch, I've accomplished my New Year's resolution so far this year outside of one game because I've only played Lies of P this week outside of Backlash and Marvel Rivals. So,
which those are ongoing games. Backlash is like your passion project, and Rivals is like your online game. I think that makes perfect sense.
Beat another deck, by the way. Green deck's down. I'm almost there, brother. It's.
So what do you have? 2 decks left? 3?
No, I think I have 4. Oh. I think I need blue, red, Nebula, black. Anyway.
Red's going to be brutal.
Yeah. The starter decks are the hardest ones.
Red's going to be brutal. Yeah, I think so probably too, yeah.
I miss the days of the plasma deck. That deck's so fun. It's so easy.
That's the funny thing is the starter decks are really easy to get going on. And they help you understand the game, and you can win the small the small stakes pretty easily. But once you start moving up the stakes, I remember the first time I got to the 3rd stake level on the red deck, I was like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
Because at first I thought the red deck was great. I loved it. But over time, you kind of start having that.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
I'm an erratic deck guy, actually. Not erratic. Abandoned. I like the Abandoned deck.
Oh, Abandoned? Yeah, Abandoned's a fun one.
Less cards.
That's a game I need to come back to. I think part of it is I kind of know that I actually don't think right now would be the moment for me to get back to it and get lost in it because I've just been, as I've mentioned even last episode, I think I've been struggling a little bit with what to play, but I do have a game on my list. It's pretty much the only thing I've played. But it'll be interesting to see. So yeah, Backlash and Lies of P. So Lies of P is well timed, as we see in the state of play.
I think it's the opposite of well timed. Actually, I think it's terribly timed.
Maybe. But here's the thing. I was telling you to play Lies of P for an entire year.
True. The problem, Lies of P DLC got announced. We'll talk more later for the summer. The problem with the DLC coming out is that I will have that game beaten and platinumed and deleted within a week. So, like, there's no...
Chris, you're going to have to start my resolution where you play DLC.
Dude, I don't even finish the main games of half the shit I buy. And you want me to play DLC?
The fuck am I going to play DLC?
What are you talking about?
It's funny because Lies of P DLC is one of my games where I'm like, fuck, that's on the list. Clearly.
Yeah. If the DLC came out today, I'd play it. But I'm not going back in 4 months. I'll be done. I'll be so done. I got to play Civ, and I've barely played that.
You're kind of falling into the thing where I am, where there's something they talked about during the State of Play 2 with an episodic game, and I'm like, you think I'm gonna play part 1? No, bitch, I'm gonna wait until that the whole game's gone out, and then I'll play it. That's kind of how I am with DLC. If I don't discover or make time for a game before the version that has all the DLC comes out, the chances of me playing the DLC are low. But if I can play the DLC while I'm in the mood for the game, that's where I do it. Some of my favorite DLCs that I've played have been on games I was just like, I was so late to Dishonored. I knew what Dishonored was. I knew it looked cool, but I never played it. I bought it on PC after all the DLC came out for super cheap, and I played the main game and then both of the DLCs just back to back to back. And then I was just done with it for a long time. And it's like, that's what I need. You know, it's like, I remember the only reason I played Oblivion's DLC, the Shivering Isles, is because I played Oblivion on Xbox and then I stopped for years, and then I came back to it in like 2009 and was like, here's my PS3 playthrough of Oblivion, and I was just riding the wave, you know what I mean? Kind of like Frontiers. I didn't play the Frontiers DLC until I returned to the game. The chances of me just downloading Frontiers and playing the DLC without replaying the game,
very shot. Low. Yeah, it's the perfect DLC is, I guess it's a whole different conversation, but the perfect DLC for me is stuff like, you know, Skyrim's a great example of, I think I've done Dawnguard multiple times without realizing that I was doing his DLC until I'm like, oh wait, I'm a werewolf, you know? And like with Cyberpunk, I did Phantom Liberty, and I didn't even plan on playing it because I wanted the platinum and I wanted to be done, but I accidentally did the first mission. I was like, this was fucking sick. And then I just beat the whole thing. But like, you need to get me into I'm never going to make a conscious choice to play DLC unless it's something insane. You know, like Night Rain, if that was Elden Ring DLC, I'd probably download Elden Ring. No, I'm fucking lying. I know I'm lying. Because Shadow of the Erd Tree...
part of you wants to believe that you...
Yeah. I bought Shadow of the Erd Tree, platinumed Elden Ring, and never played Shadow of the Erd Tree. I was like, I'm not doing that. Never touched it.
Fair enough.
I got in because I was in party chat with Sean. He's like, this boss is so hard to never beat him. Beat him first try. So I shoved my better than him at FromSoft dick in his face, and I never touched it again. But
you really big dick swing that Sekiro plat. Like,
hell yeah, I do.
Anytime someone comes at you with any kind of take on a FromSoft game and how you may not be equipped, you're just like, big dick swinging Sekiro plat.
Absolutely, I do. Sekiro is the hardest of all of them. See, it's more, you know.
Oh no! The hardest platinum to get in a fucking Souls game is Demon Souls.
Oh, I'm not talking about platinum. I mean, I'm not talking about the platinums. The game. Sekiro is the hardest
difficulty standpoint.
Yeah.
I don't think I disagree with that.
You've never beaten it, so you.
I didn't really like the game as much as I thought, which is kind of like where I was with Elden Ring. You know, like I played both for a few hours, and I was just like, eh.
Sekiro is a certain type of game, and so is Lies of P.
Sekiro is quite a bit different than a normal Soul. So not liking it is sick. Not liking Sekiro is a lot different, in my opinion, than not liking Elden Ring, because Elden Ring is a lot more like a Souls game. Just scope is pushed and crazy out, but that's also the reason I don't like it. Fundamentally, from a gameplay thing, it's great. Of course, it feels like a From game, but the level design doesn't. And so that loses me. And that's why I tell people, I'm like, I'm not saying that Elden Ring is a bad game. That would be stupid. Elden Ring just doesn't speak to the thing I like in FromSoft games. And the funniest thing about you playing Lies of P right now is that Lies of P to me was, this is, and again, we differ here from our conversations. At least I think we still do. You're a lot further in the game now. Your opinion could have changed. I think Lies of P is about as mechanically tight as most FromSoft games, and I think it's about as mechanically tight as Bloodborne. In my about a year gap between playing the two memory, I think Bloodborne's clearly its inspiration from a from side. So I think that looking at those two games, I think it's as mechanically as tight. So playing a game that's on a pretty similar mechanical foundation with some nice differences and changes, but pulling back into that tight level design, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. It's like Elden Ring just wasn't that for me, because I am not the guy who just always loves open worlds, bar none. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm very wishy-washy with them, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. In terms of what you said, like so I'm on the Barren Swamps, the puppet graveyard.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's so good.
So I have a lot of negatives and I have a lot of positives, but to kind of put some perspective on this conversation, if I was ranking the FromSoft games that I've beaten, this is third. Or, FromSoft genre inspired. The
Souls-like game. Yeah, Soulsborne, whatever you call it.
It would be Sekiro, Bloodborne, Lies of P, Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 1, Demon Souls, The Surge 2, Mortal Shell, and then 8,000 layers of hell and shit, and then Dark Souls 2. So that's my ranking.
I don't really care that you don't like Mortal Shell, but the fact that it's below The Surge is insane to me.
Well, I finished The Surge. I didn't finish Mortal Shell, so
Fair enough.
But I didn't put the time into it. But I played enough to be like, down here.
What's funny is up until Lies of P, Mortal Shell was my favorite Souls-like. And to this day, I still stand on the fact that I think Mortal Shell is the most different Souls-like of them all. Definitely. I think it really pushes it's clearly trying to do a similar thing, but its very unique take, I think, is really interesting. And it's something that I think more games need. And I actually think Lies of P eventually gets to a point where it starts to really feel unique, but those first few hours feel almost too from-coded. And then it starts to feel like, okay, it's getting into its own now.
So I texted, this will be interesting because it works. So I texted Sean today and I was recommending him Lies of P. And what did I say to him? He goes, how this random Korean studio pulled it off out of nowhere blows my mind. And I said, I mean, honestly, they did it by basically not innovating at all on the Souls formula in the slightest outside of the crazy weapon system. So how do you feel about Souls games? Because Lies of P is a copy. You want to talk about Pal World? You want to talk about those games? You want to talk about, what is it, Tears of Miastra? That fucking Horizon clone. Yeah. If Lies of P wasn't a 9 out of 10, it would be in that same conversation, because this is. Can I copy your homework? Oh, change it a little bit. Pinocchio. Like, that's all this game is, and it's awesome.
It's so good.
It's awesome.
But you're touching on a conversation I think is really important.
But it's way too easy. First of all.
I do agree with you ultimately, but I'm very curious to see what your thoughts on the final boss are, because to me, the final area's level, like, difficulty curve is like, okay.
Well, I heard I got spoiled on the last boss, so I do know that his anti-Semitism power is pretty hardcore. But he does.
There's a boss that's considered a filter.
Yeah,
and I'll be curious to see when you get there as how you feel. I can't think of her name right now, but
I don't know. Was it Belle? No, Belle's someone else.
She's on a bridge. I don't know why. It's honestly, I think the name sounds quite a bit like an Elden Ring boss name.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, when I saw the design, I thought it was cool that they incorporated the fact that Walt Disney's head was frozen and they put it on a mech. That was really dope. But I haven't gotten to the fight yet, so I haven't really seen how they set that up. For the record, I'm completely joking and vamping while Brett's looking up this boss. But yeah, I think Lies of P is just I think it's really easy. My biggest issue so far has been overextending. And that's like raising a Stargazer and then continuing and then not getting to another Stargazer for just long enough that I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think I'm level 64. But I mean, the most unique and the most interesting part of the game is the weapon system, which is you can choose your blade and your handle and kind of mix and match. So I'm running I have the picture actually. It's the Great Sword of Fate blade at +8 and the Dancer's curved sword handle. Originally I was using the the one that spits fire. Did you use that at all?
Yeah, I love that one.
I had
the boss's name's Lexacia.
Oh yeah, I just defeated the Frankenstein looking dude.
Yeah.
Which was, again, that boss is so easy. It's I'm more than halfway through the game.
I'm not saying the game is
I know
super
you're not
difficult.
fighting.
To be honest,
I
I don't really know. I'm actually in a pretty similar, outside of Father Gaswan in the beginning of Bloodborne. I don't think Bloodborne gets super hard until very late game.
Yeah,
there's a couple of there's what is it, Margot's wet nurse or whatever. That fight's a little wild the first time around. You're like, whoa, there's a lot of shit I'm not experienced in this game happening.
I think the thing is, like, it depends on what you want out of a game, because part of what I like about these games is fighting a boss 40 times. And fight
and you're build crafting too, which I actually think is a good thing. Like, you're going through and finding the build that's making the game even easier, which is funny because I did too, but at some point I actually switched to a weapon to make the game a little harder.
Well, I guess
up until Laxacia, because Laxacia is hard. That was one of the bosses where it took me a lot of times. And I finally got it.
I should be clear, just in case anyone interprets that a certain way. I have not looked up a build guide. You don't need one.
No,
I just started building towards technique, stamina, and vigor, and then this, you can change, which is what I like about Lies of P, which I don't think you can do in Souls games. I've never done it in a Souls game, where you can take a weapon that will go with, I think it's motive or something like that. It's motivity. I was right. So you could take a motivity handle and then change it to a technique handle, which is actually what I did with the dancing curved blade, so that it scales with you. And that's just kind of how I've been playing. But yeah, the weapon system is really cool. I like the world. I like the story. It is cool seeing all these characters around. I think I had messaged you that I didn't even put together who Geppetto was or whatever. Not Geppetto, Jiminy, for forever. I'm like, I've read that book. That's a fucking cricket. Are you serious? Oh, I didn't realize. So yeah, like, you were right. It's a fantastic game. I should hopefully have the platinum after my next playthrough. I think I've done most of the stuff that I need to do. So yeah, fantastic game. Good recommendation.
It's a game I wanted to come back in platinum. It doesn't seem like it's a crazy platinum. But before we get too far away from the conversation, I think you touched on something that I think is really interesting, and I think it needs to be said, because I think too many people think too often that art is often more creative than... This is going to sound bad. I'm trying to think of the way to word this. I think sometimes people think art is more uniquely creative than they realize. I think one of the things about Lies of P is a really great example of being very inspired by something that's great and basically taking all the things that you loved about the thing that's great and repackaging it into something that does have differences, but is strongly inspired by the thing that gave you that. And I think you don't only see that in games, you see that in music, you see that in a lot of things. And I think I'd be lying if I said that all the music projects I've ever worked on were not heavily inspired by something else that I was just very into, either at the time. And I think that that's a good thing. When people make games, you usually do see elements of other games coming together, and sometimes they work really well, and sometimes they don't. Lies of P is a really great example of you do not have to be the most original game to be good. And the upside is that I would never tell somebody that Lies of P is a game that is going to change the industry, like I think the From games actually have, by and large, done. But I think Lies of P understands what they're doing. Yeah, it's potential, but I think Lies of P is a good example of you can make something that's great without having to reinvent the wheel. And we need to stop being so pushy on games and be like, this isn't creative enough, this isn't original enough, because at the end of the day, even the game that you probably think is super original, you can find where there's a game that they were inspired from that has the exact mechanic that you think is one of the most original things you've ever seen. You just didn't happen to know about the game. So it's only creative in the fact that you didn't have the necessary knowledge to tie in what they were inspired by that was very similar. So you get to live in this world of, oh, this is so unique and interesting and creative. And sometimes those games do come out and they exist and they're really neat, and that's great. But thinking that every other game is going to be that, or even 1 out of 100 games is going to be that, is insane. Well, gaming would have nothing to do if it didn't have people making things that were somewhat derivative.
I mean, I think the people who, outside of like blatant examples, like that Miastra game I was talking about, that I don't know why Sony would even let that on their console. But like, everything is copied, but I think the people who would get really upset about that are the same people who are like, oh, Kratos' boat animation is the same. I get in my car the same fucking way too, dude. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I sit down in the front seat. What are you talking about? Like, so like,
I think that'd be a good video, is just showing, basically being like, for all the people that hated that, just going through the most ridiculous ways to get in your car. Just and cutting them side by side by side.
Could you imagine? And the sad thing is, I could imagine this tweet being out there, but somebody quote tweeting like a compilation of Justin Bieber getting in his car, and the tweet that they put on is like, why does he get in the car the same way every time? Why doesn't he go through the back?
I always laugh, like, what the fuck do you expect him to, like, fucking Leon Kennedy kick off of a rock and backflip into the canoe? Like,
right.
What do you want him to do? Do you want everyone to be different? Do you want him to yell shotgun one time? Do you want him the next time to like walk into the boat backwards?
It would be
Yelling
funny.
Shotgun would be funny.
It would be funny if Kratos was like, I don't want to. Boy, I do not want to row. Shotgun. Like that, I would laugh.
Yeah, it'd be good.
So I mean, yeah, I don't think like I said, I think I said it even when I was talking about it. Like, Lies of P is fucking awesome because it's a FromSoft game, and I would actually argue that it's good in the ways that The Surge or even Mortal Shell, like, let's not argue about it, the Mortal Shell or anything that doesn't have Dark and Soul or Blood and Born or Sec and Ero at the end of it, is that they try and be unique, and they're trying to put themselves in a formula, and then they're like, oh yeah, but what if you had guns? And it's like, well, make a different game, dog. Like, make Returnal. Like,
yeah.
So I think that's something that is what elevates Lies of P for me, is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel, dog. Put Pinocchio in your fucking Dark Souls game. And put an actual fundamental followable story, and you have that's a part of the game I enjoy the most. That's the best part.
There is still mystery and things for you to look deeper into and then do the kind of Dark Souls lore dive. But there is also a very clear, very understandable story that is happening, unlike most of the Dark Souls games.
I'm gonna make a reference for probably very few people. It's probably for like me and Blake. Okay, but it's like, it's the difference between Kendrick Lamar and Drake, right? Where these games, okay, everything in Lies of P is very surface level, but then if you look deeper, you realize, oh, there's more here. But then a lot of these games are just like Drake, where it's like, oh no, he's really just singing about a teenager. Like, that's really all he's doing here, you know? And that's some of them. I'm a Kendrick Lamar fan. So yeah, I like to look a little bit deeper into these games and actually get a story. And the person I followed for 13 years didn't just get rocked at the Super Bowl and isn't a pedophile. So in terms of that, I do think Lies of P does have a lot in its story and in the way it does tell its story. That is, it's really unique, and I love it for that.
Yeah, there's also something to be said that I know that Lies of P is somewhat similar to a host of other things that are doing this, where once a IP hits public domain, that someone comes and makes a dark, gritty version of it. I'm a lot less interested in that with movies and with things that are so obviously kid coded, like let's make Winnie the Pooh a murderer. And I'm like, that is, you are taking something that was so clearly meant for kids and just trying to turn it into its craziest form.
And
Lies of P is a little more subtle
way.
than that. Yeah, not even an interesting one. Lies of P is more subtle than that. And ultimately, Pinocchio is meant to be like a family story. But if you think about what the original Pinocchio story is and not the Disney movie, this is another one of those things where depending on what you think Pinocchio is, if you think it's just a Disney movie, you probably will be like, well, they're taking a kid thing and making it evil. Well, no, Pinocchio
go read the actual stories, dog.
Yeah, it's
Snow
like go
White,
read The Little Mermaid. Yeah, go.
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So when you look at all that, it's like no, Disney took stories that were not necessarily for children, but could be told to children and made them very child friendly. So
it's like
which is fine, but
if you ever want to see these stories told in a way for children, you watch the Disney movies. If you want to see what these stories are, if they were closer to Irreversible than a Disney movie, you go read Brother Grimm.
That is a midweek matinee deep cut right there.
Yeah, it is.
That is a deep cut.
Go listen to that. Great podcast. But
wow, man,
the story is awesome. I love there's that subtle detail of I guess it's not that subtle actually. It's the opposite of subtle. It's a very pointed thing. But I was wondering like where they were going with the Pinocchio lore. Because certain things you do certain actions, fuck it, you lie. You can lie, you can tell the truth.
Yeah, sure.
But like the character doesn't get the blah, blah. But then there's a point in the game where the character does that does happen, but in a completely different way. And when I realized what that was, I was like, oh, that's fucking sick. That's cool.
Yeah. See, I love that too, because like one of my favorite games on PS3 was Alice Madness Returns, and it's the same thing where it's American McGee taking on the idea of Alice, which again, if you think about the Disney movie, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Lewis Carroll's actual Through the Looking Glass. And I'm wrong, McGee is still taking it darker and far more mature, but the reality is that the heart of those stories are not just necessarily a little girl getting lost in a whimsical thing. Like there's more to it than that. And so I do like seeing people do that. But, you know, I think it's like one of those things where there's an exception for every rule. Just because you may not like one thing or criticize it in one doesn't mean that there's not another thing that did it in a way that you enjoyed. And Lies of P just happens to be taking something from the public domain and doing something interesting with it. So, and thankfully, it's just not taking something that was Disney oriented, like people being like, Mickey Mouse is out now, we're going to make a Mickey Mouse horror movie immediately. It's like, oh, how original. Like,
nobody has the balls to do that properly. Because
you know what bums me? Go ahead. Finish.
Winnie the Pooh, maybe what I'm going to say is controversial, but like a Winnie the Pooh as a murderer doesn't even flip the original thing on its head. And it's not interesting. But if you make Winnie the Pooh like a child predator, that's like objectively a more interesting way to flip it. Right? You've got Christopher Robin, I don't mean like a fucking like an R. Kelly.
I know what you mean, like
though. Okay. The way you looked like made me feel like I was being weird. And I'm not trying to be, but I'm saying like you take that like, oh, this is for kids, and then you go, yeah, he's for kids. Like this is the scary part of this whole thing. And then Winnie the Pooh is played by, I don't know, like an aging Jonah Hill who's coming back. It's almost like
it's almost like you take the original and you make people view the one that was inspired off of in a different context.
Right.
Because it's closer to that. Where him being a murderer, you can't really see that in the original, but you can look at the story of him and Christopher Robin and all the Disney stuff and kind of go, what if I tilt my head a little bit and picture him as a child predator? Oh.
Yeah. Like that recontextualizes that whole thing. It's kind of like I was thinking, you know, if you watch some movies with a different soundtrack, they become a horror movie. You know,
Oh, sure.
I had this idea of trying to write a script that's a horror movie, but the actual story is just a day in a restaurant. And I think that would be cool, but it's just like, it's just the music and it's just the framing and it's the, you know, I had this idea of a scene where they're like looking out the window and it's like they're talking like it's a zombie horde, but it's just a fucking tent top. Like I think that's funny. You know, like
that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're on Lies of P. You did say that you had a couple of downsides. I don't feel like I necessarily heard you say them. Do you want to take a second voice them, or do you just want to leave it where we have it?
No, I mean, I think the only downsides I have is that, ironically, it's very close to a From Software game, and in that way, like there are some sections where the air can kill you, and like I don't know, I don't love that. Like I don't really like that.
Just wait.
I know what you're talking about. I'm there. Like there's that whole section with like the mist.
Wait more.
Oh, fuck that.
Yeah.
Like, I do think that this game is a little confusing. Not in like a bad way, but like I got lost loss is like a weird term because I got lost trying to find where I was. So like I died and then I was trying to get back to all my ergo or whatever and just couldn't figure out where the hell I was supposed to go. And it was an ironic thing because I couldn't find out where I was supposed to go because of the shortcuts I've opened. It was one of these things where I'm going up these shortcuts and like, I'm like, okay, I don't actually know I know how to navigate forwards, but I'm having trouble figuring out how to navigate backwards to this like specific point. And one of the things that Elden Ring does do is it does have a map, but there is always that guiding light of I'm not Elon Musk. If you want to go over there, follow the light. If you want to go to the main story, you know. So I don't know. It's one of these things where like it's not a big complaint in the grand scheme. Like I would still give this like a great score. I recommended it to my friends. Like I like the game. But there's some From Softwareisms that like we don't need. I don't need this. I don't need the swamps that he's obsessed with. Miyazaki, stop doing it. No, don't stop doing it. But like everyone else, stop doing it. Because he is so good that we accept that bad. This is a new studio who is lucky that I'm willing to give them the time of day after I walked into the part I'm supposed to go into and the air murdered me.
Yeah, but see, this is a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And this is kind of one of those examples of you can never make everyone happy. And the reality is that I actually think that game won over a lot of goodwill for the most part by being so true to a From Software game because it was trying to be a Souls-like game. And so I think the problem with some of these other games, like you brought up Mortal Shell, and Mortal Shell is actually one of the games that generally gets talked about positively in regards to being a Souls-like. And there are a few others, of course.
Final Fantasy 16.
But usually when people bring up the ones that don't, their complaints are usually it's not From Software enough. And that's not the words they're actually saying, but if you were to summarize the mass of what they are saying, it boils down to, well, they tried copying, but they just couldn't do it good. Whereas this game, I don't disagree with you. It's very From coded, and it wears that inspiration very heavily in its design. But in a weird way, I feel like it does anchor it to people who are the biggest fans of that genre to feel like I feel at home here. Like, yeah, maybe these things are annoying, but these are all the things I find annoying in the Souls games that I find endearing at the same time. And I think that was ultimately the best thing they could have done. And I've seen a few people be like, this game is a little too creatively bankrupt for me. And I'm like, I disagree. But at the same time, I just feel like at the end of the day, you're always going to piss someone off when you're doing something like this. So it is what it is. But I'm glad you're liking it at the very least. Because, you know, I think I'm a lot less likely to recommend games to you because I know that you struggle to stick to a game. And so I only really want to recommend games to you when I can really truly envision you picking it up, playing it and sticking with it long enough to at least feel like you got something out of it. And even though you didn't finish Stellar Blade, I do still feel like the recommendation to you ultimately was well served, because you did play it for longer than you play mini games, and you did seem to enjoy the time you had with it.
Yeah, I
and
like
then it's just you kind of fell out of infatuation with it and moved on, and that's okay. It happens.
Yeah,
but
it's hilarious you said that on the heels of you recommending me a 200-hour video game. I cannot believe you just said I struggled to recommend you video games so you don't stick with them. Also, is it time for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Which it might be, because I do want to play that game. But that's very funny two things that have happened. What have you been playing?
Well,
I've seen,
but you also asked me what you should play, and I know 100%. That Rebirth has been floating around in your head.
100%. I'm not saying that I didn't solicit. I'm not saying any of that.
Yeah,
two very funny thoughts.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
So, on my side, I think last week or last episode, I talked about The Ruined King, which I still think is a great game. I just don't think I was in the right spot to continue playing it. I thought it was going to be there, and then I don't know, it just didn't. So I didn't play games for like almost a week after the last episode. Like, I think the first time I turned my PlayStation on to play anything was like maybe the next Sunday, like the following. So it's like almost like, I guess, 5 or 6 days. And I turned it on and I was kind of like, I don't really know what I want to do. Like I turned the system on, but I don't have an answer for what I'm trying to do. And I ended up downloading a few games, but the thing I actually downloaded with the intention of playing, and I have stuck with, though still slowly, has been the Talos Principle 2. Now, the Talos Principle 1 and 2 were on sale for cheaper as a combo than just the Talos Principle 2 by itself. So if you ever want to play either of those games, Chris, feel free. They're interesting because they're puzzle games. So I think they do sort of tap into what I was looking at with Sonic, where after Silent Hill 2, I kind of want something that's just really gameplay focused that's really good. But I think the thing that always has made the Talos Principle so interesting is that it taps into one of my hobbies that's outside of gaming, and that is philosophy. And those games are all big on having, characters that are talking about. Actually, the second game is kind of wild in terms of where it went, but the first game is a puzzle game where you have this voice talking to you, Elohim, and he's acting as like a creator / guider figure. And it digs into a lot of, the Talos Principle is a real thing, and they're just using that for their name here that you can look into. So that's kind of baked into all that. And it's like, what does it mean to be alive? What is living? Can robots exhibit life if given a certain set of principles? If given a simulation and able to eventually overcome puzzles? Because, the game talks about how for humans, one of the things that make us human is that we like to play. And we like to solve problems for nothing other than just fun. And so the game's built around puzzles that are a simulation to eventually try and get artificial intelligence to be able to play and think outside the box and do things creatively. And then once they have passed all the tests, they're ready to be born into the world as the new layer of humanity. And so the second game comes on and just is no longer strictly a puzzle game. It is a puzzle game, but now it's also like a fucking adventure game. So you're running around these big hubs that have got the puzzles set on islands that you can explore. And there's extra puzzles you can find that are hidden. There's little bunkers you can find that have like these little palm scanners that you can get extra information and read and like get little flashbacks or get audio things. And they dive into way more about what it means to be human, what it might be like. It's kind of touching base on the fact that this is all happening after a world in where humans died, and they put us all into the simulation to eventually make another life form. So I love that shit. It can be pretentious if you don't like philosophy, so I don't necessarily know that I would recommend it to someone who doesn't like things they find to be pretentious.
Philosophy is objectively pretentious, but I love it.
It is,
so
but
I'm
I also fucking love it.
I love talking philosophy, but it's incredibly pretentious.
Yeah, it's like one of the things I do, like most of my YouTube listening for the most part is philosophy channels. And one of my favorites is Alex O'Connor. He's great. I love listening to his stuff. He brings in a lot of people. And so this is kind of right in that. It's kind of at this axiom between like philosophy just for what it means to be alive, but also where religion comes into play to some degree, but also what our place in the universe is, and is it a person first universe or universe first universe? Looking at all sorts of things like, a universe that's beautiful is cold is cold and pointless if there's nothing in which if there's nothing in the universe in which can perceive it. And it's an interesting idea, and I love shit like that. So I'm probably like 10 to 12 hours into it. There's multiple. I'm taking my time. I'm doing all the side extra puzzles and stuff that you can do. I'm not aiming for platinum. Since I'm in this gaming funk, I am not trying to add this layer of every game being something I'm worried about platinuming. I'm letting that go for a while until I'm feeling on my feet in gaming again. But I very much enjoyed it.
Brett will have the platinum on the next show, just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
I don't know. I have a feeling that definitely since this game is so open, this strikes me as a game that's going to have a trophy list that has a ton of missables. I would love to be wrong, but if so, it's probably going to be I have to replay it to get missable trophies, and that's just not what I'm aiming for right now. So you never know. If I fall in love enough, I might do it, but I don't think I'm going to do it. I don't think I'll stumble into it. Let me say that. I don't think there's a way. I've probably already missed like 5 trophies.
Community's take for next week. Who gets a platinum first, me or Brett?
But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm, of course, always down for recommendations on any games that you think may interest me. And thankfully, the thing that we're going to actually spend the most time talking about today is going to be great, because I was very impressed for the most part and saw a lot of things that genuinely excited me during this state of play. But before we get there, Chris, let's take this opportunity to briefly touch on the PSN outage. So I want to tell you, as someone who has been so busy with other things and also been iffy on gaming, I literally wasn't even trying to play a game at all. The entire 16 hours it was down. I never once got on and was like, oh, I can't do anything. I had flooring to do that I was doing. I was having to go take my daughter to do some stuff. I was doing stuff with my wife. It literally never crossed my mind. I knew PSN was down. My brother was calling me. I was like, damn, it's still down. I'm like, okay. I'm installing flooring. I don't know what you want. So it was kind of really funny for me to be outside looking in at all the people being like, this is bullshit. Because I'm just like, there are things in life. Like, I get it. I love that gaming is a great hobby. It's a way to de-stress. Like you mentioned, it's when we were talking before the show, it's I don't want to do anything, therefore I'm doing gaming. Like it's your relaxer. And I get that. And it sucks that it was down. But some people are treating it like oxygen was limited for 16 hours.
Dude, you go first.
Me go first? That's it. Well,
okay.
Do you actually mean in terms of Sony's response?
No, talk about whatever you have to talk about first. That's fine.
Well, the only other thing there is to talk about it is Sony had a response, which was, hey, as a result of us being down for 16 hours, we are giving 5 days of PS Plus to all PS Plus subscribers. And of course, the flip side of that were people saying that Sony, there's multi-layers here. One of the things I saw, and I actually do agree with, is that Sony probably could have been better communicating it. I think that's their biggest blunder here, if any, is that from the moment that it was down and they knew it was going to be down for a while, they probably should have at least hit somewhere and said, we are aware it's down, we are working on it. And instead they chose not to do that.
But they did do
I think that would have been, I didn't see that. Now,
they did.
And I thought I saw a bunch of other people saying we didn't know it was down. So if they did do that, then great. That part of my thing is completely gone. But I saw a lot of other people online who were acting as though they didn't, and I didn't see it. So I thought maybe they didn't.
So Sony sent one.
That makes it worse. Yeah,
what?
Go ahead.
No, Sony sent one tweet, and the tweet was, PSN is down. Check here for more information. We'll let you know when it's back up, basically. And the conversation that I saw was, well, they should have been more communicative. What did you want them to do? Retweet it? Like, I don't know what you want. Yeah, they did. I mean, it wasn't minute one, but they did say, hey, it's down. Like, we're working on it. Yeah. This is where you go to get more information when it's back up.
Yeah, interesting. Well, then I wonder why I saw so many people looking that way. Which, that goes to show, like in my searching through, because of course this is well after the fact.
Yeah.
I didn't think that I'd seen anything that said that either. So that's interesting. That's been long enough ago now. It'd take me a long time to even find the tweet. I believe you. It's just more of that was really my only thing.
Sony.
So on my side, at least, and then I am curious to hear yours, because I think it actually affected you. I actually saw where you talked about the fact that you couldn't play a game that you had intended on playing.
I couldn't play anything.
Yeah, well, because you didn't have anything downloaded that was from my account.
Correct.
Well, actually, Lies of P is
I bought
mine,
that.
is it not? Oh, you're correct. I was going to, and you swept it out from under me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so even whenever I heard it was down, I was like, well, if I get time to play, I have Crisis Core, and I was already debating starting it, so I'll play Crisis Core. I have it physical. Yeah, but I saw people kind of hitting this thing where they felt like that wasn't enough. And the only other thing that I don't really know that I strongly agree with, but I saw people saying on there, and I am curious to hear your take on this part in particular, and then your take on the rest. I think 5 days for 16 hours is perfectly fine. I think that's way more than they had to do. I'm going to be dead honest. I don't think they had to do anything.
I don't think they should have done anything.
I think it was ridiculous that people think there should have been anything. It wasn't long enough for it to be that big of a deal. Other people are down, and look, I'm glad that they did give something. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have, like you seem to think, and that's fine. I get why you think that too. It sets a precedent that might be a little dangerous. But in the sense they did give 16 hours and then giving 5 whole days, that's more than 5 times the amount of time that it was down. So in that regard, I think it's really difficult to see people kind of hitting back with this. We should have a months, some kind of free game. Basically, people were like, this was equivalent to the 2011 outage. Therefore, we need a program where we get a free game for having to be down. Now, the part that I found was interesting is I saw some people saying that they think the amount of time that was given was fine, but that the problem they had with it was that it was only given to people who were paid. And that this is where I'm at, and the crazy thing here is the people who paid for PS Plus actually lost part of a service that they pay for.
Right.
And they are therefore more reasonable to look and go, you bought into this, you invested into this money, therefore, for this specific service, we are going to reimburse you and then some for the time that you did there. And people go, well, yeah, but there are free-to-play games, and the majority of game time we know is spent on Fortnite, which is a game that does not require PS Plus. But I think that's crazy to think that you're supposed to give 5 days of free PS Plus to everybody just because they couldn't play Fortnite. But they weren't out anything.
No.
They weren't out money. They didn't go, oh, I paid for a month of PS Plus and 16 hours of that month was not active. That's a different thing. That's a different agreement between the consumer and the company. This is something you're paying for that they feel a need to go, we got to reimburse you because you did pay. So,
yeah. I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about this, and I know that like at least I feel like I tend to be on the side of the fucking corporation, and it's not that, but I just think that I think the conversations that I saw and some of the conversations that I had, it made me question, like, do we respect ourselves as human beings? Because, like, at what point do you not just sound fucking insane? And for the best example I can give for some of this is like what's happening in Marvel Snap. But this specifically, it was like, if people were like, oh, well, my single player games that I downloaded don't work online. Yes, they do. Like, they work offline.
Yeah,
100% they do. Like, oh, I can't play anything. If you follow
the system setup the way you're supposed to,
exactly,
where you make your system your home system, the system asks you to do it.
Right.
Or like, it at least says, hey, you should do this, and then you can back out of it.
And it literally says you should do this because if the PSN is out, you can play your games. You can play your games offline that way. So the issue that I think I found crazy was it's like the only people that lost stuff were people like me or people who couldn't set up the console properly. And if you're like me, I got shit to say because what we're doing is a morally gray or a legally gray area. I'm not putting shit. I'm not saying shit.
Nope,
I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, we are in our own form gaming the system to some degree.
Yeah, 100%.
And they know that. That's why they limit it to 2, because they know that it's going to be likely that people try and do this. Because I remember I remember the early PS3 days where you could have up to 5 consoles sharing. I remember I bought Bomberman Ultra, and me and all my friends were playing on my account, of my account. Like, they download it and then switch to their account. Those were insane days.
Right, and that's nuts. But like, I don't know. The vast majority of people should not have really seen any interruption unless you were trying to play an online game. And at that point, like, are you asking Comcast for PSN Plus if the Comcast goes down? No, you're not, because that would be fucking stupid. So I don't know. I think the biggest reason that I think Sony shouldn't do it is exemplified by Second Dinner on Marvel Snap. Okay? Second Dinner has given compensation for every little thing that the community has whined about. There was a card that got nerfed, which I guess maybe you don't know full well, but you know enough to know that in a card game, if a card's too powerful, you fix the fucking card.
Yeah.
Right? And people are like, oh, well, I spent my tokens on this and now I need to now the card's worse or the card's better, and so they'll compensate people. And it got so bad to the point where when TikTok was banned, and I'm not saying that people didn't deserve compensation for this, but when TikTok was banned, Marvel Snap was banned because Marvel Snap was owned by ByteDance, which is the same company that owns TikTok. So when this happened, and I believe that this was the slippery slope, they gave away, and this was incredibly nice, it was incredibly generous, they gave away upwards of $500 to every player in game rewards. So just at a fundamental level, I don't think Sony should have done this, because what happens when it's down for 17 hours? You're going to give them 6 days? What about a week? A week, yeah, you deserve compensation, but to what end?
Yeah, and what's funny is, more speaking on your specific example there, I think that goes to show just how scared games that rely, because Snap is free to play. It relies solely on the back of having a lot of players and players who are willing to spend money on it. Yeah. And I think it goes to show you that they felt pressured to do that. I don't even know if it was necessarily exclusively from people bitching, but I know that they feel like all it takes is one slip up for someone to replace us as their go-to free-to-play game that they spend money on. I don't know another card game, but let's just, Hearthstone, let's just say they'll go, if we fuck up, Hearthstone exists, or the next game that's a card game on phones, or even something that's not a card game, something else that tickles their fancy that happens to be on phone or console that they're more willing to play, put their time into. And that's it. And that don't get me wrong, that sucks. That sucks, but also, Jesus, can you imagine giving that much just because you were down, because since you were down and now people are willing to come back because it's back up, but you have to basically dangle fucking a gold carrot. It was please.
It was, and the interesting thing, right, is it was so much that, like, we've talked about this. I've said this openly. I am a Marvel Snap whale. Okay, I've sent you pictures of my main deck. My main deck, I say this with no hint of irony, and I think I'm undershooting it. I think that deck is worth $200, if not more.
Yeah.
I have not spent money since that happened because I don't need to spend money.
Yeah.
I have 4,000 gold. I had 15,000 credits. I have spotlight keys. I have fucking tokens. I don't need to spend any more money. I do because I'm stupid, but I don't need to. Right? Yeah. And like that's what, so for me, like, I say this all coming off as someone who is, getting down on my knees for Hiroki Totoki. But that's not the case. The thing that frustrates me is if you are asking for compensation after 16 hours at night, by the way, if you're asking for compensation for that, at what point does Sony go, or any company go, this is fucking ridiculous. We're just blocking compensation. We're never going to hear this again. So then when something actually fucked up happens, it's the boy who cried wolf. This was 16 hours that you could play video games. You could play every game in your library unless it had to do with the internet. So what are we doing here? If it was actually a case of we got DDoS attacked, nothing works, you can't touch your games online because the licenses got deleted. You better be better be damn sure I'm looking for compensation. But all your games were fully playable if you followed the instructions at the beginning of turning on the console. So why are people sitting here and screaming at Sony for compensation? Because you're just making yourself look dumb and greedy. And then the next time something shitty happens, it's just, well, no, we're ignoring this because they asked for compensation after everything. That's how I feel about Snap. We asked for compensation after everything. Okay? Every time something happens, I hope Setup Dinner has a really good compensation plan. Like, these guys were when TikTok got banned, there's a non-zero chance that they're all out of jobs because their game is banned. And the first tweets I'm seeing on this thing are, when's compensation coming? It's like, you guys all sound so fucking stupid, because if I was running these companies, I'd be like, I don't fuck them.
Yeah, I do think that there's a really weird balance to strike between. I think there's a reasonable amount of consumer entitlement, and then I think that there's overboard. And I think the problem is that entitlement kind of automatically carries a little bit of a negative, hint to it.
Yeah.
But, I do think to some degree products live and breathe off of the back of consumers. So there is a level of reasonable entitlement to be had with any consumer business relationship. But I think we have seen far too often the entitlement of consumers push businesses to do things that I think if anyone who just didn't have skin in the game were to step back and look, be like, this is kind of crazy that you're demanding this. And like you said, I mean, I think everybody always talks about the slippery slope, but it's, I think it's not even about the slippery slope. I think it's just, it's hinting at a similar thing, but even at work, I have to go through this sometimes where I'm like, you just don't want to set a precedent that you're not willing to keep.
Well, it's like, I got into an argument with a server because she's like, hey, can you do this for my customer? They really asked and, whatever. And I said, no. And they're like, why not? It's easy. It was literally just, cooking something in the oven that's supposed to be fried. And I'm like, I'm not doing it because if I do it for him, then I have to do it for his brother. And then I have to do it for the guy at the bar who sees that I did it. And then we might as well just put baked fries on the menu and your fucking ticket's going to take 40 minutes. So we're not doing it. You can, that's the thing. And I'm sure you know it in your industry. I know it in mine. The second you say yes, that is now what you do every time because you said yes once. So you never say yes.
Unless you're willing to take on the long term.
Exactly.
That's what I do now. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm willing to put diced tomatoes on a thing that comes with grape tomatoes, but I'm not changing an entire dish for a customer. I'm not doing that.
Well, it's like it's levels of reasonability. Like, right? If you make something that you're just putting ingredients into something, and the only step that they're asking is, "Hey, I'm really allergic to this one thing," you go, "Of course, it's one less thing to put in. No big deal. It's not changing my amount of time." And that's why, like, restaurants have things like gluten-free menus. It's like, these are the items that we guarantee will be gluten-free, but we're not going to go and try and make every single thing. Well, if I did this, I could make this gluten-free too, but it's going to take longer, or I have to have specific things. You just don't do that because it doesn't make business sense at the end of the day. So, look, I think it's a really weird place for people to be. But also, the last thought I truly have with this is I think that this goes to show that gaming has become a bit too synonymous with online. Because people basically hear PSN down, therefore the online component of PlayStation's down. Therefore, if you game on PlayStation, you can't game. That's the way that they're taking it. We know it's not true, but even if it's just the only game I wanted to play during that 16 hours was Black Ops 6 and I couldn't, yeah, you're right. You couldn't game, but that's not really entirely on Sony. That's on your preference, what you like to play. What if Call of Duty servers go down? Is Sony on the buck for that because that's the only thing that you wanted to play?
Exactly.
Is Call of Duty on the buck for that because that's all you wanted to play? So is Activision supposed to give you the amount of if Call of Duty servers were to go down for 24 hours and that's the only reason that you bought PS Plus? Is Activision supposed to reimburse your 1 day of PS Plus? I think that seems crazy. We all know that. So that's where it gets into this weird thing where I guess I just didn't. I knew in the back of my head, but I don't think I've had this kind of confirmation to this degree that this is how synonymous being connected to the internet has become with gaming.
Well, I also think part of the problem, and I think this is obvious, this is anything, this is politics, this is even fucking being a Marvel movie fan or a Kendrick Lamar fan, all of this stuff, it all goes back to Twitter being one of the most toxic and vile places on the internet. And I'm not talking about Nazis.
It's also fun, by the way.
Sure.
Part of the fun is the chaos. Throw it out there.
I had a ton of fun the other day. I was getting in arguments with vegans from Japan and just sending them pictures of the meat that I just ground. Like that was fun for me. I don't know what to tell you. But it's toxic. And I think I bring that up in this conversation because a lot of what I was seeing was bigger accounts perpetuating this like, well, now you can't play your games, all digital future. I'm glad I have fucking physical. How about you just tell people, please make your account active because if this ever happens again, you won't experience an interruption. I didn't see people talking about
what they're
that.
saying is also true, of course, right? Like if you have physical, you really don't have to worry about it. But you know,
sure.
But it's not like, the only. It's not the only way. Yeah.
But arguably, even in that case, like your digital games work the same as a physical game if your account is activated. Yeah. And again, I'm glad that we're on video right now because over there is like fucking 150 PS3 physical copies. So don't talk to me about the fact that like, oh, I'm stuck in this all digital thing. Or, you know, it's just a matter of if your PS5 was set up correctly, you would not have experienced an outage unless you're playing an online game. And if you're playing an online game, I'm sorry. Let's touch some grass. Like literally, it's just 16 hours. I game probably more than most people, and I just went to bed. Like, I don't know. We got to be adults. If the industry is going to mature, maybe the people in it need to mature too. And this is a very good time.
Partake of it.
Where we could look at ourselves and go, do I really need to be asking for a year of PS Plus or a free game because I couldn't play my games for 16 hours?
There we go. So Chris, I think that's a good way to wrap that up. And real quick, I do want to go to the community state question that you gave us. And I thought it was a fun one. So community state question this week was, with so many studios shuttered by buyouts or after buyouts and their IP potentially in limbo with their new owners, what IP would you give to which studio to realize a new entry in? Now we're trying to be a little tighter and we're already running long. So going to do just a few and move on. Appreciate all the answers we did get. The first one that we got is from Stingray X, one of our patrons over on patreon.com/Nartech. Thank you. He gives a little to the show every month so that we can help keep doing this without having to dig into our own pockets, which we're very thankful for. So he says, give the Mercenaries franchise to Volition. What a demolition combo that would be. That'd be interesting. Because Mercenaries is one of those old franchises. Chris, have you ever played a Mercenaries game?
Yeah. In my vast physical games collection, I have all of them.
Do you really? I didn't know because I'm trying to remember. I know that there was I think 2 of them were PS2, Xbox era, and then I think one of them was 360 era.
There's one era. PS3.
Yeah, that sounds right. So that's a long dormant franchise that just kind of, I guess, is of that era. But I don't necessarily think it's a franchise that wouldn't last. Yeah. Jesus. That one's pretty interesting. I like this one from RMG0731. He says, depends if you're giving an IP to them at their peak or their last state of them. For example, I wouldn't give any IP to the current BioWare like I would have in the 2000s. I have to be careful because I haven't played a BioWare game. I haven't played the only game they put out since Anthem.
He's right.
But from everything I've seen, because I was heavily debating whether or not Veilguard would be the game to pull me out of my slump.
No.
And after looking and really considering it, the one thing that I wanted from a BioWare game was really strong writing. And I already had my questions because of all the things that were making the rounds about the somewhat controversial topics. And I even said the topics or the content of the writing is not the issue. It's just how poor the writing around the content was that made me be like, we're focusing on the wrong thing. Y'all are saying that they're pandering. I'm telling you that they're just bad writers for at least the scenes I have seen. This is bad writing. And that seems to be a problem throughout the entire game from a lot of people. And so I chose against it. And honestly, I was still kind of on my BioWare boycott. So I think that's going to carry through. I don't feel like I'm losing anything, so it's okay. TT Dog 666, another patron, says, fingers crossed that they show what some of their first party studios are working on, or were they all now canceled live service nonsense? I think he may have put this in the wrong section. But who knows? Rude Days 93, another patron, and I'm going to do one other answer outside of this one. He says, kind of cheating, but even though Tango Gameworks is back, I think Microsoft still owns the Evil Within IP, and I don't think Tango is going back to the Evil Within anyway. So I would say Evil Within to Ninja Theory. I think Ninja Theory with Hellblade has done a really good job of diving into the horror aspect. Having not played Hellblade 2 yet, I think Hellblade 1 showcased their ability to tap into psychological horror, which I think Evil Within 2, from everything I've seen, I haven't played Evil Within 2. I played the first one. I think Evil Within 2 try to dive much more into being scary conceptually rather than just focusing on chainsaws and shit. Chris, did you ever play either of the Evil Within games? You're a big Resident Evil 4 fan, so part of me thinks that you would be drawn to them, but I didn't know if you ever got around to them.
I believe I beat Evil Within 1 on like the PS3.
You're right. It was a cross-gen game. Holy shit. Yeah.
But the only thing I know about the Evil Within 2 is that incredible scene from that game.
Yeah, you sent it to me.
Looks like the evil is within 2. And they both look at the camera. Incredible so stuff.
Stupid. Love it. Yeah, the last one we have is over on our Twitter, which coming back around what we were doing. Mr. Dennis, a one-armed wolf, our reigning trophy champion 2 years in a row for the trophy competition. He says, The Order 1887 by Blue Point. So, Chris, Bloodborne 2 is out of here. The Order 1887 is now Blue Point's next project.
I mean, sure. I think they're very busy with, moving the team that was working on God of War Ascension
back
2
to the Bloodborne,
back to Bloodborne 2. That's been the whole issue. My sources have been telling me that they've been working on Bloodborne 2, but they really believed in the God of War game while Jim Ryan was there. But Herman Holst, one of the last things he did before he was demoted from the CEO position was put everyone back on Bloodborne 2. My sources describe that as a last-ditch effort. But it's clear that it didn't pan out. So,
Jesus Christ. Speaking of which, for anybody who actually isn't a fan of Ready at Dawn and or The Order 1886, MinMax put out a interview with one of the two co-founders of Ready at Dawn, and it's an excellent podcast. He talks a little bit about the Order creation of it, some stuff that went into the background of it, as well as some really cool stuff about how they went about creating Daxter on PSP and some of the behind the scenes on what going into God of War on PSP looked like, and why they felt like they wanted to move on from handheld and give their shot at a big AAA console release, see if they could prove their stuff. It's really cool. And he doesn't quite go into what the sequel would be, though he hints at the fact that they did pitch it. And he said that Rue Rosario, the other guy who was part of that, he would love to get him on an interview so he could talk about the Order sequel. And I hope that happens one day and that he spills into it. Because at this point, it seems really unlikely it's going to happen. Never say never. Okami was a flop. And Capcom just announced a new Okami. So what the fuck? Basically what I'm saying is you never know. The original Nier was really a flop. And guess what? Nier Automata comes out and fucking sells gangbusters. This is a crazy industry that you can never really, truly understand. And we're going to point at that in a minute when we talk about one of the reveals during the State of Play as to the why behind things. But yeah, I thought that was a fun one. So Chris, I think it's time for us to go ahead and dive into the State of Play. And I think first and foremost, I do want us to talk about some of the games, but I think let's quickly talk about kind of the structure, because this being more of a showcase style, I think that was pretty obvious from the 40-minute thing. I was really curious on how this was going to feel from like a pacing standpoint. And I've got to say this may be, considering that they were really going up and down with like how big the game was, some being indie, some being ones that were focused more around VR stuff, some being really big AAA games, some being more in that AA sphere. I thought the pacing of this was excellent. And I was genuinely surprised because I don't think that there was ever a time where something was on screen that I wasn't really interested in, that stayed long enough for me to ever care. And before it was on to something that I was like, that looks cool. That looks interesting. Even if nothing else, I think it's worth looking more into in the future. Do you kind of feel the same way about it, or was there kind of lulls for you?
Disappointingly, I think I don't have a good answer to this because I did my math wrong and thought this started at 6. So I started watching this at like 5:15, which is fine. It's a VOD. But I don't have a good answer to this because everything that I wasn't interested in, I skipped. So I don't have a sense of how well this was paced.
Okay, that's fair. But let me ask you this, because I think this is worth saying. Some of the things were kind of updates on games we've already seen, so I can see why it's easy to skip that. Do you think you skipped anything that was a newer announcement or the first gameplay shown of something new? Because my only question then would be, how do you gauge that something is not clicking with you enough for you to skip?
So I skipped Lies of P because I didn't need to see it.
Makes sense. You're playing it right now anyway,
yeah,
just
I didn't
in
want to
case
get
the DLC
spoiled
shows
or anything.
Yeah.
Which actually, ironically, I did get spoiled a little bit of what I did see, but that's okay. There was that the Clay game.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't even something where I was like, I'm not interested. It was like, this looks cool. I am interested, but what's next? You know?
Okay, fair enough.
And then it was like WWE. I skipped over. So I don't give a fuck about that.
Like pointing out, like I cannot bring myself to care about Borderlands.
I skipped that too.
I chose not to skip anything. I watched the entire thing just because part of me wanted to be able to kind of comment on the way that they went about pacing it. And I think the only time they got close to really losing me was I felt like they stayed on Borderlands a little too long. But that is with the caveat of knowing that I can't not bring myself to be interested in Borderlands. I don't know what it is. It's like I want to try. Even part of what they look like, I'm like, I feel like this looks like it should be something I think would be fun. But I just know from all the times I've tried playing the Borderlands games over and over and over again, they don't land with me. Eventually, you got to give up and just call a spade a spade. That's apparently I don't like spades, and Borderlands 4 is a spade, or Borderlands as a series is a spade. So. All right, well, let's shift the focus a little bit to talking about the games that did kind of impress you and to the ones that were kind of a highlight of the show. Now, I know that there's one that is game of the show for you. Let's save that for a little bit later because there's a conversation I think we want to have around that, and we have a listener question that ties into that. So we'll kind of use that as our outro point of conversation. So we'll kind of work around it, talk about all the other things that we thought were interesting, and then we'll close out on both that and our predictions list. Or actually, I didn't think about that, Chris. Is this a good time to kind of compare our predictions to what we saw?
Like we got to go right in there.
All right. Well, here we have Chris wrote out a list of numbered predictions, which I thought was pretty interesting. Mine is just fucking thing, space, thing, space, thing. So I didn't number mine, but I did expect there to be quite a bit. So Chris, I'm going to run through yours real quick. And anyone we're on the same, I'm going to say, so you put Marathon release date and or beta signups. And one of the things I had on there was that we would I thought we'd see Bungie Marathon gameplay.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I got bamboozled, actually. That like Path of Eden, I thought that was Marathon.
Oh, yeah.
And then it had the same music. This isn't like a Lies of P FromSoft thing. It was the same music.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just,
I mean, it's obviously not literally the same, but it felt the same. So I'm watching this. I'm like, it was funny because I almost texted Sean like, Marathon looks pretty good.
Yeah. Oh man, that one was pretty interesting. There was yeah.
Anyway, predictions.
We'll keep moving on. So next prediction that you had was Intergalactic Spot, no footage. I want to dive in a little bit more. What do you mean by Intergalactic Spot? You thought that they were going to reference it, but not?
No,
show
I
anything?
thought they were going to have a moment where Neil Druckmann was in one of those green screens, just talked about Intergalactic, but they wouldn't show anything new.
Interesting. Okay, so next one up is Insomniac. Now, I'm assuming that you just kind of meant any announcement from Insomniac.
Yep.
Doesn't really matter what it is. If I press you a little, what do you think was the most likely Insomniac announcement if you were going to get that here? Were you thinking Wolverine?
Spider-Man DLC. Or Venom, sorry.
I debated Spider-Man DLC, but if anything, let me ask what you mean by that. Do you mean DLC like what the actual first Spider-Man got, or a spin-off game that is more Miles Morales-sized?
Whatever they were planning on doing with Venom, that clearly is not happening. Now. That's what I thought we'd see. I thought we'd see that or Wolverine, but the question you asked me was what was the most likely, and to me that would be the Spider-Man DLC.
Yeah,
or
that's fair.
Spin-off, whatever.
Yeah. And that would actually kind of fit their release pacing more, where they do a small game before their next big game. Like, hey, Wolverine is coming. Wolverine hits here, but before that, here's Spider-Man Venom.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. So that's interesting. All right. You have Resident Evil 9, which was
shot for the moon,
MIA. Yeah.
Shot for the moon.
Yeah. And then lastly, one that you got correct by broad stroke. And I'm going to tell you, I actually got this one dead on in mine, so I was pretty proud of myself. You did new Sony IP, which did happen.
Yeah, nailed it. There's no couching my prediction. I was right.
Yeah. So here's what I put for the same thing, for what qualified as yours. Mine was next Housemarque game. ? Because I was like, it's been long enough since Returnal. Housemarque make quicker games that don't have to worry so much about story. There clearly is a story, but they're quick iterative gamers. I think 3 years is enough time for them to start showing their new game. And I was very right. All right. The last one that you had as a bonus, Bloodborne 40 frames per second patch, no PS5 version. I also love that you refuse to let it be 60 frames. It's only going to be a minor update.
Minor update. No
smooth
bug fixes
30 frames
either.
per second patch. That's all it was going to be.
Yep.
Even frame pacing.
No, the Bloodborne no stuttering patch.
Yeah. Okay. So here is my list was Lost Soul aside. I hoped we'd at least see gameplay and a 2025 confirmation of date. Thankfully, we've full on got a gameplay trailer and a release date. We'll talk about that a little bit. I guess we can use that as a way to springboard onto that right now. Chris, I've been following that game since Yang Bing put out the trailer on YouTube, and me and my coworker were talking about it. I've got to talk to him about that tomorrow, by the way. But yeah, so Lost Soul Aside is finally coming. It's another one of the it actually happened beforehand, but it ended up kind of getting folded into the China Hero project. I've not heard you really talk much about this game. Does this game strike a chord for you at all?
A minor one. Hey, that was clever, right?
I didn't even mean to set you up for it.
Home run or touchdown.
And there you are.
But realistically, it is pretty minor. It looks cool. I thought it was neat. This looks like this and then especially Shinobi, both looked like games that I will buy because they are so visually cool, and I will play for 10 seconds. So I want to look more into this one. I was intrigued and wary by the fact that I saw this was like a one guy team, and given what this game is, I'm sure it's bigger now. But
it's way bigger. It started as solo development, and he made a trailer showing gameplay and all that stuff in Unreal Engine. And then Sony ended up picking it up and building out Ulti-Zero Games and partnering with him and giving him a studio worth of people to support helping pull the game up, which is part of why I think it's taken 10 years. I think it's been this thing where I think the game looked a lot different as a single person making this in terms of scope. And then I think once you got a real thing, like a real team behind it, I think that scope creep came into play. And part of why I say that is they've shown this game multiple times. And this is where my fear comes into play with it as well. I'm very excited, but I am tempering my expectation because there's something about this trailer that strikes me as really familiar to what we saw from Final Fantasy 13 Versus. And honestly, the way that 13 Versus' development went before it finally got canceled or turned into 15, and then 15 got completely rebooted from there after they showed it again. When they showed that Final Fantasy 13 Versus had been rebranded to 15 back in 2013, 14, whatever it was, there was a really cool trailer. And it showed like Leviathan outside the building, and the building's getting twisted, and Noctis is like jumping around and has all this really cool dynamic movement. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, this looks really cool. 13 Versus had a lot of cool ideas. And then we didn't hear from the game for 2 more years. And it turns out that's because the entire game got scrapped besides the characters, and they remade the whole thing in like 16 months or some shit like that. So I know that that's not what's happening here. Or at least I know that's not what's happening with this trailer. So even though this trailer is giving me those vibes, the fact that the release date is 3 months away makes it really easy to assuage those fears. But there is still the fact that this game has seen a lot of trailers that started focusing on a lot of the same things. And you even see it in this trailer. There's a lot of cool dynamic movement. And I'm hoping that the game is not an example of the scope going way too out of its ability to really do anything meaningful with anything. And then it just ends up being a cool visual ride. I hope it's more than that. I think that Sony's had a pretty good eye with a lot of the stuff they've had going on. And I think Stellar Blade proves that they know how to look at a game and be like, it's worth it. And it's not from somebody they have a previous relationship with, like a Square Enix, where I think Forspoken, Sony probably knew like this is not in the ideal condition to come out, but we have enough of a history with Square and we've already agreed to this. We're just going to let it happen and see what happens. I don't think Sony cares. I think if this was not going to pan out, I think Sony would have canceled it. Mm-hmm. So I am hoping for a Stellar Blade-like performance somewhere around mid 80s would be great. If it even lands in the high 70s and low 80s, I think that's good for a first game from somebody who started this as a solo project. So that one's cool. My next prediction, it's funny, I have like connotations beside them. Ghost of Yotei, quote, and then in parentheses, middlingly likely. I didn't really think it was going to be here, but I thought there was a chance because they claimed it to be a 2025 release. Did you? I see you didn't include it on yours, but did you have any thought that Ghost of Yotei would end up showing here?
No.
Yeah. Is there a reason? Do you think it's... originally, I debated because I thought it's later in the year, so they'll save it for a dedicated state of play later. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they showed a lot of stuff that's coming in the latter half of the year here. So I don't necessarily know if that's... And they showed stuff for 2026. Things that we hadn't seen, though. So it's a little different.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. I don't necessarily have a great reason. I just didn't... I don't know. I guess part of me doesn't... Yeah, it seems too soon. I mean, I don't believe them that it's coming out this year. So that's part of it.
I actually agree with you. I think this game's going to get scooched into the first quarter of 26.
But I guess here's the thing. I'm saying a lot of words for I didn't really care for Ghost of Tsushima 1, and I don't, at this moment in my life, I don't care about Ghost of Yotei. So I'm going to be honest, it didn't even cross my mind to predict it because I'm like, oh, yeah, that's coming out. Okay.
Fair.
I hope it's good.
My next prediction... Yeah, me too. My next prediction, Metal Gear Solid 3, and my note that I put beside it was Sony seemingly did not go for exclusivity, so they'll definitely want marketing to be leaning on the series PlayStation history. And sure enough, we saw it here. And I won't be surprised if Sony takes lead on all the marketing for this.
But didn't they announce it with Xbox?
I'm trying to remember if they announced it with Xbox or not. Now, this may just be, look, at the end of the day, this is like a showcase, and this is a game that's going to have big presence on PlayStation. So maybe it was just Sony wanted it here because it is a big game. But I feel like if it wasn't announced at Xbox, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They don't want to have to necessarily go the Silent Hill 2 full exclusive route, or you know what I mean, full console exclusive route. But they still want you to think Metal Gear Solid PlayStation. I'm buying it on PlayStation.
Trailer 1 was at the Xbox showcase.
All right. Well, there we go. Prove me wrong. My prediction was right, but my reasoning behind it was wrong.
Oh yeah, I was just curious, but.
And my next one was 1 to 2 PSVR 2 games from third-party developers, not internal teams, and I fucking knocked it out of the park. There was 2 PSVR 2 games shown from third-party developers. One of them was that Midnight Walk game.
Yeah.
Though I don't think that's a PSVR 2 only game. I think it's just PSVR 2 compatible.
I don't think they put any exclusively PSVR.
I don't think that they did either. But my prediction still stands. My next one I had hope for. I thought that after Astrobot won Game of the Year that they would do another free DLC packet and announce it here. And the chances that they'll do a DLC packet is still pretty high. They just didn't announce it here.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised. But
now this next one, you didn't have it on yours either. And I wonder if it's for the same reason that I have it on mine, but with a big caveat. Death Stranding 2, and my note was very likely to be saved for Summer Games Fest because of Jeff and Kojima's relationship. And it seems to be unlikely that it'd be releasing in the first half of the year.
It's funny because we have polar opposite reasons for not predicting it. I thought that this was so obviously going to be here that it wasn't worth predicting.
So you did think it was going to be there. You just thought it was stupid to even predict. Oh, funny.
Well, he just put out that tweet of him editing the trailer just as this is being announced. I'm like, oh, this is obviously going to be there. And this is going to be 30 of the 40 minutes. And then no, it wasn't there at all.
Yeah, I am very curious when this game hits. Do you have an inclination? I feel like this is probably going to be like an October game, maybe an August game.
We will find out the moment GTA 6 gets announced for a release date.
What? So you think he's going to wait to time it to GTA 6? And then he's going to be like, okay, once I know I'm not releasing anywhere around it.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, it's Kojima. He can do whatever he wants.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Smart. Already talked about teasing the next Housemarque game, so I was right there. Bungie Marathon was my next one. Then I had 2 more. If meant to really be a showcase stand-in, then maybe we see Fair Games. And my really crazy loop out there was Pragmata re-reveal.
Dude, what is going on with that?
It's the next Deep Down. It's the same. It's Capcom too. It's the same fucking developer. Capcom promises a game for PlayStation at the showing of every console, and it never comes out. It's like fucking. It's just part of the ritual now. To get a new PlayStation, we have to get a new Capcom game that they don't intend to make.
I'm gonna put this. I'm speaking. Adjust my camera so that my eyes are more in frame. Hiroki Totoki, or I don't remember the other guy's name. I'm sorry, Herman Holst's ex-girlfriend. When you announce the PS6, do not buy rights to the new IP they're announcing. Just give them all of your money for the next Resident Evil. Just do that. I don't want to hear about, I don't fucking know, Contraband. And it never happens. I don't want to hear it.
Oh my God, I fucking forgot about Contraband.
That was a nice little sneak in there, huh? The whoop-dee.
That's the team behind Just Cause Xbox exclusive.
Well, Xbox exclusive, but yes.
Well, you know what I mean. Xbox Game Studios published game.
Yeah, PS5 games, yes.
That game is probably not even happening.
Probably not.
I would love to be wrong. I don't say that because I want it to go bad, but that's a good example of something that came and fizzled so quickly. Because I mean, clearly you remembered it, but I think it's just because you're thinking of vaporware. You're just thinking of games that are never coming out. Which I'm wrong. I'm not saying Xbox has a huge problem with that. PlayStation has a huge problem with that. Specifically at console announcement, Sony always shows one game that never makes it out at console reveal.
We got Agent, we got Deep
for PS3.
Down, we've got Wild.
Pragmata now.
Wild. Wild's one.
MinMax did a Shuhei Yoshida interview, and he talked about Wild being canceled because it just kept the scope crept so much. They kept being like, we want more. At one point in time, they were talking about having a map that is the actual size of Europe. Are you fucking insane? Mean? Who even wants that?
I don't know. The only way I want that if it's 1-to-1, because at least then it's a novelty.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
you know, like if I can literally drive to Portugal and see my grandmother's house, cool. You've given me a reason. Other than that, fuck yourself.
Now it's just massive new mystical land.
Yeah.
Why? Exactly. My last one on here was same as yours. It's a bonus Bloodborne 60 frames per second patch. And I said for PS5, but I meant in the capacity of like Days Gone got that update that allowed it to run at 60 frames per second on PS5, even though it was the PS4 version. I thought it was that.
The funniest thing for me Sony could do is just never touch Bloodborne.
Honestly, Shuhei talked about that in that interview, and he said that basically Sony's thing on it is that they respect Miyazaki, and Miyazaki has not had time for it, and they don't want to touch it.
Yeah, without
Miyazaki's hand. And I hate to say this, but I think that's a critical blow to your actual Bloodborne 2 theory, which I know is kind of like it's almost like a shit post that you just keep pushing along.
Yeah.
But realistically speaking, I don't think we get anything Bloodborne related at all from Sony unless Miyazaki's involved. And the reality is that he may retire before he ever feels like he can return to it. But who knows? Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, when he retires, that's when you get your 60 FPS patch.
Then you go, well, we don't have to worry about disrespecting him because
he ain't gonna get mad and make a Microsoft game. So
but follow me down this thread though. There is a real question of why the fuck is Sony going on this DMCA and removal strikeout for all of these the Lance McDonald patch, which has been available for like 6 fucking years. Like why? Why are they going after these things if they have no intention of doing anything on their own? They're not asking for money. They're not jeopardizing anything on it. I guess you could argue that the Lance McDonald patch is convincing or at least motivating people to have a modded PS4. But it's a PS4. What the fuck is it really like? Are you worried about PSN security?
Well,
and maybe the answer is yes, they are worried about PSN security, but you know, it feels very weird to do all that this late and then not have a real reason for it shown, at least yet.
I mean, we won't know until something happens, but like, it could just be as simple as Sony's never going to do it, and they don't want someone else. They don't want people to know from now until then on how easy it would be.
Sure.
That could be it. They could have just, because there's a non-zero, there's a world where they just pay Lance McDonald and he gives them the code. There's not, if he really, really wanted to do that. So maybe they respect Miyazaki so much, he was like, I don't like that. Take it down. They said, okay. Like, who knows? Or maybe Sony's just is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They didn't realize what some niche guy was doing online until someone stumbled upon it.
Nah, she's retired now.
Yeah.
But like for like 3 weeks or whatever. Point being, Shu knew about it.
Oh yeah.
So someone in the higher ups knew about it. I don't think it's that.
There's sure probably they did
something
know about
going on.
But
honestly, it could be nothing more than listen. We're getting to be a bigger and bigger corporation. We've got to dick sling a little. Sometimes you just got to let people know that we have the ability to do this.
Yeah.
And all it really comes down to is that legally speaking, I don't think they really have a ground to stand on. But who in their right mind is going to waste money taking this to court? No one.
Well, why don't
That's
they
all
have
it is.
like to stand on? It's their IP.
Well, because it's fan made. There's no one is doing anything with it. No one's selling it for profit. It's literally just a thing that you can download. It's really like fan projects are really hard to take to court. The main reason that companies make policies around them is just so people don't waste time doing it when they know they're going to just come to them and say, listen, we want you to take it down. Not because they know they'll win, but because they know that they have more legal power and money to go to court with it. And they'll just exhaust anybody out. So it's like Sega is really big on allowing people to make fan games for Sonic so long as they're not being sold for profit. And that's why somebody completely remade Sonic 06 using Unity. And that's sweet because it fixes a lot of the problems that Sonic 06 had and moves it to a completely different engine. And that's cool. But since there's no money involved, they don't care. But
Well, that's how
I
you
always,
got,
it's funny because you brought up they could just pay Lance McDonald for his work and be like, let's voice work it in. I would love to see Sega just be like, Project 06 is really good. Can we just pay you for the game that you developed, and then we'll work on porting it to PlayStation 5 and Xbox so that we can re-release Sonic 06? Because why the fuck not? There are people that like that game, unironically.
Well, that's how you got Mania, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's how you got Mania.
Yeah.
And then the murder of
Fan
Sonic the
communities.
Hedgehog was
I wish that
fan
would come
game
to
too,
console.
wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But I mean, across the board, you see a lot of cool ideas come around from that. I mean, even something as simple as like the Sly Cooper trilogy that they did for PlayStation 3, that Sanzaro did. Sanzaro just literally went to PlayStation and was like, listen, here's a pitch for Sly 4. And they were like, yeah, I mean, maybe if you'll remake Sly Cooper for us, then we'll let you do Sly 4. And they were like, cool, we'll remaster all of them. So, I mean, it's cool to do stuff like that and just be like, yeah, I'm going to go be ballsy and do something interesting and see what you think about it.
Is Sonic 06 the PS3 one?
Yeah, the PS3 360 one. Yeah.
Okay. Because I have it on my shelf and I was looking at playing it the other day and I looked at the trophy guide. Did you know that's a 9 out of 10 difficulty trophy game?
I am not even remotely surprised. Partially because that game runs really poorly and a lot of the mechanics aren't even really like they're supposed to be. So one of the great things about the remake is like he changed the mechanics for some of the things to clearly be what the developers intended, but to work like they're supposed to. And so it's pretty interesting to see.
That's funny.
That's a game I always wanted to see because I thought it would look cool. And see it come out, that'd be pretty cool. But all right, man. Well, I think from there, let's just kind of talk about the games that kind of stood out the most for us. We know which one we're saving for the last. So are there any highlights for you that kind of come to mind?
I mean, the biggest highlight is I think the most obvious one. And that's, God, I'm trying to remember the name. Tides of Annihilation.
Dude, that looks so cool.
It does look cool.
Now, similar, I do worry it's in development for PS5. I'm a little worried that we got showed a lot of stuff that looks like gameplay, but may not actually be gameplay.
Yeah.
But damn, does it look cool.
It looks cool. I'm super interested in it, and I'm also... It's giving me Souls vibes, and I just kind of want to be excited for a game that isn't a Dark Souls game.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of a Souls.
It's really it is getting a little frustrating. As someone I enjoy the genre, but it seems like every game that is a dark fantasy game that doesn't have Final Fantasy slapped on it is a Souls game. You know, and it's like, why does this have to be this? I'm sure it'll be good.
Yeah, but I get it.
Regardless of it, this looks pretty sick. So I'll be playing that.
So here's the problem is that I don't feel like they tend to say it outright, but the little blipper for it says a single player action adventure game.
Mm-hmm.
So my hope is that it's more Stellar Blade and less Souls.
Yeah,
because I agree with you. There's a point in time where I'm like, I don't want every game to be this. It's cool. I do like the formula. I like seeing it be used in other areas, but at the same time, like one of the things that someone said the other day, I think it was an opinion piece where they were like, it's cool to see Ninja Gaiden coming back suddenly because it's a cutthroat action game in a very different way than Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, it's cool to just get back to a game that's just action.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, yeah, that's true. Like we don't have to do this. If you die, you got to go find your body, and you know, it's like all that gets to go out of the door. And I'm heavily debating Black 2 being my next game because it looks super fun. It does.
I almost bought that when it was announced, but that was a FOMO buy. You know, would have been so.
Well, that's why I've sat on it because I'm like, am I just excited in the moment? But I've liked Ninja Gaiden in the past. I liked the Ninja Gaiden Black that they did for Vita. I thought it was really good whenever they came around to it. No, Tides of Annihilation looks really cool. But any other standout ones for you?
I have to go through the list, but honestly, like I thought it was a good state of play, but there wasn't a ton. You know, Shinobi looked cool. Metal Eden was the game that I was talking about.
So Shinobi, before we get too far from it, Shinobi kind of got me because my answer to the community's take question, I forgot to say this there, because I was going to answer it, was I thought a Shinobi game from Twinmotion, the Dead Cells developer, would have been really cool. And while this Shinobi is not from Dead Cells creators, tell me that this Shinobi doesn't kind of have a Dead Cells vibe going for it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely does. I think that's why it appealed to me so much at first look, where I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This looks great. Like, I love this look. And then the more I watch it, I was like, this is one of those games. I'm going to buy this and I'm not going to play it. Like a certain game I just bought for some fucking reason, Blasphemous 2, because
why the fuck did you buy Blasphemous 2?
Dude, because fucking I listened to Summon Sign. Brad Ellis has talked about that game a lot, and I was like, I want to give this a shot. It was on sale, so I bought it. And then every time I look at it, I'm like, I don't want to play this. So I'm like, why did I buy this? Like, there was no reason.
Oh, you poor soul.
It's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. All right,
maybe I'll play it. Who knows?
Did you pull a list up? You want to throw out any more, or do you want a second to look?
No, you give me your next one.
Yeah, I've got a few, and then you can hop back in whenever you feel like you found some that's to your liking. I think the first one, I actually thought the Midnight Walk looked really unique. I like that kind of claymation look. I'm a big fan of, as long as the gameplay still holds up, I'm a big fan of when game kind of takes other art forms like Neva did and a lot of the Thunder Lotus games where they're hand-drawn and then they work hand-drawn art into a video game engine. I think that's really cool, and I love seeing that here. Actually going through the thing of animating everything with claymation and then just working it into where it's controlled. I think that's really cool. I think the game looks unique as a result. A game that struck me as interesting is I've long said that I thought that the Dynasty Warriors franchise is just it's always been a little too samey for me. Like I don't feel like the game had changed much since the first one I played on PS2, and so I've always just kind of been burnt out on it because I don't feel like they don't have a lot of aim to me. But you know what actually makes a lot of sense with the Dynasty Warriors gameplay formula? A fucking roguelite. So I don't know if I'll necessarily play it, but I was at least intrigued by Warriors Abyss because that makes more sense as a Dynasty Warriors game to me than actual Dynasty Warriors. That doesn't mean the Dynasty Warriors doesn't deserve to exist. I'm just saying it's an easier slot in, and I'm like, that's a cool idea. I thought that one looked pretty good. You know that I'm a big racing guy, and I really liked Sonic Racing, but I always lamented that they kind of pulled away from the more dynamic version of Sonic's Racing that they did during the Sonic Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed. And this Crossworlds trailer brought all that shit back. They're doing air flying. When you're going on the water, it turns into a boat. All that shit's coming back for a new game, and I'm excited because I love one of my favorite kart races of all time is Sonic Racing All-Stars Transformed. Mod Nation Racers is actually my favorite. Crash Team Racing is definitely up there as well. That looks sick. I'm very excited by that. I think Soros, whatever, actually looks really cool.
It's time to talk about that, huh?
If it's remotely like Returnal, I can't do it.
Yeah,
I can't do 3-hour runs that I'm expected to die and then just redo. I can't. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, they what did Sweet Iki Ryan Jones? He sent me a tweet. From XDev, in case you missed it, a key gameplay distinction between Saros and Returnal is permanent resources and progression, making every death valuable. You can find more in the latest PlayStation blog post. So I think, let's see, what was my response to Ryan? Because it kind of sums up how I feel. It was, honestly, it sounds like a roguelike, but not committed to the genre.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I think Returnal is a great game and a terrible roguelike.
Agreed. But the problem is since the game that it's trying to be is a roguelike, I actually think the game it's trying to be it's bad at, but it's a good game.
Right. Like, it's fun to play Returnal, but like, this is... So I'm one of those guys, which my friends do not reciprocate. I would like to point this out. If any of you listening, I do this for you, you don't do it for me. But the only game that I've ever just been definitively, no, I will not download that and play with you is Returnal. Because I will not waste the time. Oh, so I got to the third world and died. It's been 16 hours and my wife just had a kid and I got to start it over. Fuck that. That is genuine. To me, it's a waste of time. I get why people like it, and there is an aspect of super high risk, super high reward.
Yeah,
but I'm not doing it. I have, full well, I have thousands of video games I could play. I'm not playing Returnal.
Can't say I blame you. Oh man, that's rough. Part of me wanted to go back to Returnal whenever they did the co-op update because I thought that might fix it and I might have fun if I'm playing with someone else. But I know the same thing's going to happen. I'm going to have that day where I'm like doing a run and I'm like, this run's so good, it's killer. And then suddenly I'm just like, okay, what happened? I'm not restarting. So that's unfortunate. Like, but that's
here's the thing. I say all of this shit and I did download Returnal again because I'm like, oh, hey, I'll give it a shot, see if I was wrong. But even in just that little bit, that moment of downloading it, I'm like, good God, man. Do you know how much progress I could make in Lies of P while making no progress in a play session of Returnal?
See, and I think that's the trade-off, and that's why I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I've talked a lot about what I think makes a good roguelite, and it's always my go-to thing is a great roguelite is quick succession. It should be something that you effortless as soon as the end runs, you're like, it's so easy to say yes to another one. So easy, in fact, that you may find yourself playing until 2 a.m. and being like, oh shit, I didn't mean to do that. There is not a world in where I would die in Returnal at 11 and start again. It's not happening. I'll just play something else, and that's
and that's the thing. Like, what obviously for someone as advanced as me, this isn't the same. But like for the average person, a full
please.
A full Balatro run. Listen, I've played 400 hours of Balatro. Like, it doesn't take me as long as it would take anybody else. But a full run of Balatro for me is max 30 minutes, and if I'm going long into endless, like you're 30 minutes. I don't even know if that's enough time to get out of the ship at the beginning of Returnal. So, like, again, Returnal is fantastic, and I'm not surprised people love it. One of my best friends, Sean, he loves it too. It's just, for me as a person who already wastes time, I'm not going to play a video game that is trying to waste my time.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's funny because I remember like people would be like, I don't play Souls games because I feel like they're wasting my time. And I don't even completely disagree with that, because if you can't catch on to the gameplay loop of a Souls game, it is wasting time, because you're essentially like, I had a friend, my coworker, who I was telling I got to talk to about Lost Soul Aside. I let him borrow Bloodborne. He spent like 8 hours in Old Yarnum just fucking going. And I was like, oh man, he never even got to Gaswan. He finally, and I mean fucking barely, skin of his teeth, got to the cleric beast.
Just got mogged.
And I was like, dude, and I tried telling him how to approach the cleric beast, and he just could never beat it. And one day he just brought me the game back, and I was like, I think this is the right call for you.
Some people just ain't got it like that.
Yeah.
One thing one game I did. So I think Split Fiction continues to look fantastic.
So good.
And it's just, I know what Hazelight does. And I know what they specialize in, and I'm glad that they do it. And I wish they didn't, because I will never play their games.
Well, and it's problematic because I think we get to this point where I actually kind of hope that I like Split Fiction so much that I beat it with my wife and then I just play it with you anyway. Because the problem is you have to have someone else that you can consistently play with and that you enjoy playing with enough to do this. Right. And if you don't, you're just like, fuck me.
Yeah. It's just, and that's the thing. It's like, I'd really like to see that game, especially like what it's about. I'm like, that's just right up my alley. But yeah, I don't have, I don't have a significant other, and I don't have, you are married, and I would expect that if you're going to play a co-op game that your wife is interested in, you would play it with your wife. So it's like, who am I going to play it with? Like,
yeah.
I love my friends, but like a lot of them, I'm very like, unless I know they're going to like something, I'm not suggesting it. And I'm not going to hit up Sean and be like, you want to play Split Fiction? And then he doesn't like it and it's just complaining. And that's not even an indictment on him. That's anybody. But like, especially with these guys, I'm like, we'll play Marvel Rivals and you can bitch there. Like, that's fine. But like, I'm not going to.
You made that choice on your own.
Yeah. I'm not going to, beg you to play something like that. And then we just don't do it. So.
There's a game that I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on, because I'm kind of bouncing around on how I feel about it. Mind's Eye.
Oh boy.
Part of me looks at it and goes, maybe I would like this, even though there's a lot of telltale signs for games I tend to have issues with.
It's an open world game. Don't even pretend.
Yeah, but see, here's the complicated thing about that. Because like we say, there are open world games I do enjoy. Sure. Like, okay, part of my thought, which to be fair, it's different. But as I was watching this and thinking through that, would I play this? How likely am I to play this? It's open world. What does that mean? I had that thought of like, Cyberpunk's open world. Cyberpunk has driving. And yet, I love Cyberpunk. And like I said earlier, there's an exception to all things that you consider to be a rule for yourself. Cyberpunk kind of flies in the face of a lot of things I don't like about sandboxes, but at the same time, I fucking adore that game. Mm-hmm. Could this game be that or no? I don't know the answer.
My guess is no. A, because I think it looks bad, but B, because this is the guy who designed Grand Theft Auto and you don't like Grand Theft Auto, so why would you like this?
Oh, this is the guy that designed Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah, it's Leslie Benzies. It's his game.
I have no fucking clue who Leslie Benzies is.
Well, it's not my fault you're not cultured, but he designed Grand Theft Auto.
That's good to know.
And he's been there. He was there until a little bit after 5. So yeah, I would think you don't. But I have complicated feelings on this game, because if you told me this was a 2026 game, I'd be extremely excited. But he told me it was a game for this year, and it does not look like that. So I'm not excited for this. When I saw there was
my curiosity here, I think part of it might be that I really like the movie Upgrade, and there's movie. There's a sprinkling of this feeling like Upgrade adjacent, and I'm like, this could be cool. Yeah. But I think I'm letting my love for the one thing overly taint the fact that I might like this, while I'm fighting the majority of me that's like, probably not.
I mean, look, this is one of those games for me that I will have to see a Skill Up review, a Maddie review, a IGN, a Metacritic. I have to see everything. And even then, I'm not going to be fully convinced, dude, because there was one scene at the very beginning of the trailer where he's turning, or they're driving a red car. And that scene looked like it was from True Crime Streets of LA on the PS2. It looked so bad.
What's funny is that they had so many sections of the driving car, and I was just like, "This
looks bad."
I was like, "This driving could be good."
Yeah,
it's hard to tell strictly from looking, but I was like, "Looking, it's not painting a great picture."
And driving's all feel, so there's nothing you can do in a trailer to make me feel what it's like.
You're right.
You're
right.
But looking at it, I was like, "This looks bad." And then there were a couple of those explosions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, these explosions look fucking terrible. Like fucking terrible. But the story seems pretty neat.
It depends on what it is, right? If it's a AA game, which I kind of think it might be, it being a partner with IOI.
That was interesting too, huh?
Yeah. To me, this feels like this is not meant to be a AAA open world. And that might carry with it some charm that pushes me through some of the things I don't typically like about open world. But much like you, this is going to be something where I have to watch deep dive reviews and see a lot of gameplay, see someone talk about what the systems are, and then see where we land.
It's not a AA game. I'm reading about it right now. It's a big budget single player project.
Interesting.
It's built by Rocket
things,
Boy to launch a fresh game platform akin to Fortnite and Roblox.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. I'm trying to read a little bit more about it so I don't seem crazy, but all it says is that it's a big budget single player game. So my doubt is that it's going to be charming in that way anyway.
Sure. All right. Well, you have any other games that you want to throw out?
Let me take one more look at the list, but I actually think I'm kind of good on anything that was super major.
All right. The last game I want to throw towards you, then. Hell is Us. It looked so cool last time they showed it, and here I'm still just like, this looks sick. It looks so good. I'm
gonna play that. That's 100%.
It looks so cool.
I will play that.
I'm having a skip out on the name. Directive 8020.
I'm not going to play that. I don't care about their games.
The dark pictures are really expanding where they're wanting to go. Yeah. I completely fell out of The Quarry. I don't know. I really liked Until Dawn, but I don't know if that was a one-off for Supermassive. Part of me wants to be like, Supermassive made it. Maybe it's good. I don't know. I'm having a hard time being excited for this. Part of me wants to be excited, but I haven't really been excited for any of the other Dark Pictures anthology games.
The thing for me with Supermassive, and this is all a matter of taste, so feel how you want to feel. But when you've made 5 or 6 bad games and one good one, I tend to just start to believe that the good one is the fluke and not the bad ones. So I just have no interest in anything they do at this point. It's one of those like, Sony knew what they were doing when they didn't buy this one. So,
yeah, that's true. And it's a good example of why you don't buy off of one game.
Right. And then there you go. We've got Firewalk, which is a sample of why you don't buy off of Zero.
I think I kind of hope Sony learned a lesson there. Last game, I guess I'll kind of throw out there because I do think it has the potential to be cute. Konami coming back around with yet another game, this little small Darwin's Paradox.
That was the other one I was going to mention. Yeah,
it looks cute, and it gives me this weird, like, somewhat modern take on Abe's Odyssey from PlayStation 1. It's kind of similar where it's like you're going through a factory that you were intended to get chopped up into something that you'll eat, and you're trying to escape. I don't know. It just gives me that Mudokons. The big difference is, at least from what they've shown, it doesn't look like you're trying to save other octopus, but I thought this looks really cute.
It does look cute. I don't have a ton to say about it, but it looks cute. I will definitely be playing it. I'm looking now. That was one of the ones I was going to say to you. Obviously, big shout out to Yakuza Like a Dragon, Kasuga Ichiban. Oh no, that's the okay.
Dave the Diver.
RGG. So I'm reading IGN's article, right? And they just write like a little headline for the Yakuza game. But because of the way RGG names their game, I actually thought that was the full title, which is just Yakuza Like a Dragon's Kasuga Ichiban is taking a trip to Dave the Diver. Tell me that doesn't sound like a title for a Yakuza game.
Yeah, because what's the one they actually have right now? Like a Dragon Pirate. It's a ridiculous name.
Yakuza Like a Dragon Pirates in Hawaii.
What a ridiculous.
It doesn't make any sense.
Oh shit. Okay, so look, across the board, I was pretty interested, but go ahead.
Dreams of Another. I want to know how you feel because it's a game that I thought looked cool that I don't want to play, and I want to know how you feel.
I'm sort of in the. It's as it was starting, I thought, "Is this a fucking game made in dreams?"
Yeah.
And then the game is called Dreams of Another. I thought that was really interesting.
Before we go into the last,
I like what he said. It looks cool, but I'm iffy. I think it's a game that is probably a really unique experience, but I feel like there's not a lot of substance there. I'd love to be proven wrong. So.
It looks like a game that like I'll buy for $3 on a sale in platinum.
It's funny that you say that because outside of the very unique visual styling, which even then, I don't know if you remember, I can't remember the name of this game, but one of the early PS3 games that was easy to 100%. I have it on my trophy list. I cannot for the life of me think
Proteus?
of this weird artsy game.
Oh, Eden something. It's Eden something.
It's not Eden either. It has it's super weird name. Like it has a Q, maybe it starts with a Q. I genuinely can't tell you. But if you know it, if you've seen it, you know it. And it's this weird game where there's like a guy in a chair and he's like a black outline and he can like move his head different ways. And I'm doing it.
Thomas Was Alone?
No. It's a really early PS3 game, and it does not have a platinum. It only has a 100%. I can move through my trophy list. I'm going to go look at it while you're talking about the other things, just so I can get the game name out there because I need to remember it. But it was one of those examples of one of the easy games to early 100%. And right after I platinumed Infamous 1, which was my first platinum, I started being like, let's see what's around. And so I kind of went that route. So I'll find it in a minute, but go ahead. What else do you want to talk about?
No, I was just going to say, I'm surprised that you didn't mention Digimon Story Time Stranger. I just did it again. The new Digimon game.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
Mm-hmm.
But Cyber Sleuth did not stick with me as much as I thought it would. Oh,
really?
It was good. It may have just been wrong place, wrong time. I got about halfway through it if I had to guesstimate. So yeah, it's hard to say. There's two games. I was pulling two games together, but I've got them. But yeah, I do think it looks good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know for sure if I'll go for it.
So I guess the last game to talk about before we head off for 1 to 2 weeks is the game of the show.
Real quick, the games, for anyone who is curious, Chris, you may even recognize them. One is Period Detuned.
Yep. I have
and
that
the
one.
Other one that I was mixing around with it, they're both very artsy games. Linger in Shadows.
I also remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
This motherfucker said Q. What the fuck?
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, but I knew the Detune was the man with like the black silhouette, and I was like, I remember it had a weird name.
There were some good times with those. You remember like that Frogger game? That was an easy 100%.
Actually, that game was banging. That game's good.
Game. There's Proteus, which is good, and then there's like this little like something Eden, which is just like a tech demo, basically.
There's a lot of interesting games, not even from a trophy standpoint. PS3, I often talk about how much I love that era, and it's just because people were just making whatever game their heart contented, and people were letting people do it. I bring up Self-Factor Psychokinetic Wars all the time. That game is so goddamn fun. Another game that comes to mind that was just a weird game that I don't think it was as good as it was trying to be. Do you ever remember a game called Hydrophobia?
No.
Yeah, I think it was a download only game, so it was a PSN exclusive. Pixel junk shooter, really good.
Do you remember Pain?
Yeah.
I kind of want to play Pain, but I don't own it on PS3.
Do you remember Burn Zombie Burn?
I remember the name, but I don't think I played it.
It was super fucking fun, actually. It's another one of those like, all right, this is a good time. Yeah, looking through old trophies here is kind of interesting. Like Section 8 was like a third party take on trying to do something Halo inspired, but across the board, and it's fun. It was a good game. Wow. You can just see whenever I just gave in to trophies. Good times. Good times.
You became a true trophy hunter.
Brink.
Oh man, I've played that recently. Actually, it's on PSN streaming. That's how I know I don't like playing games that way. But
Brink is? I thought that game was online required, and the servers would have been shut down.
You can still platinum Brink right now. Yeah,
wild. That's really interesting. It's actually not a bad point. Like the 3022 is a pretty solid platinum.
That's not bad.
Mortal Kombat, the reboot on PS3 is 5,830. I think that must be a pretty difficult one.
Oh, it's hard. Yeah, I think it's funny if you look at PS3 because I remember. Do you remember the game Eat Lead with Matt Hazard or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Do you remember the reputation for that game being an easy platinum trophy?
I don't. No, I don't know that I've ever. I know the game, and I remember seeing the case all the time when I worked at GameStop. I never played it. I don't think I know anybody who played it.
Well, I own it, so if you ever want to play it, you can. But it was one of those games I remember when I was listening to podcasts, they talked about like, oh, well, it's super easy platinum. I'm looking at the trophy guide, and it's like 25-ish hours. I'm like, that doesn't make it a hard platinum. But like, we have changed what that means. Because like even Alone in the Dark, you must remember Alone in the Dark being one of those PS3 easy platinum games. That's like a 25 to 30 hour game, like to platinum it. And it's like, oh, this is super quick, super easy. I thought just whatever. I remember back then like that was an easy platinum.
That's because My Name is Mayo. When it came out, it single-handedly changed the idea of an easy platinum. Regardless of how you feel about it, that is the truth of what My Name is Mayo did.
Hold on. I don't even mean that type of game. There are no short walks on PS3 either.
Yeah, that's fair. Fair.
If you're platinuming a game on PS3, I think it's like 10 hours minimum for like 99.9%. Even like Mini Ninjas, which is an easy game, that's like a 20-hour platinum.
Yeah, like the ones were like the very late PS3 games that were all the Telltale games. So like Walking Dead is probably like one of the easiest platinums from a time perspective.
Even then, that's what, 12 hours?
8 to 10, yes. Like even if you know what you're doing, yeah. So, man.
All right, so game of the show, Days Gone Remastered, dude. Fuck yes.
Okay, dude, first of all, fuck yes, because like you said, there's a lot to layer in here. Let's be real. Like you said specifically, I am glad because I can get this for $10 and I can just platinum Days Gone again, which is just a great excuse to play Days Gone again. And I never played it after all the updates. So I get to play a polished version of a game I already thought was fucking amazing. So that's great. There was a bigger conversation to be had here about why this is happening, what this means, if anything, and why this continues to clearly be Sony's odd strategy. I don't know. There's some stuff I want to look up on it, and I'm actually curious if it shows it in this thing, because the first question that I want to dig into, and we got a question from a listener that matches here. It's a pretty simple one. So Rude Days 93, excuse me, hit our Discord, which is linked in the description below, and says, put yourself in Sony's corporate, in a Sony corporate suit. There has to be a reason for the Days Gone Remastered, a sequel or something, right? And this surprisingly spurred a lot of conversation in the Discord as a response from that. Now, Chris, I am curious to hear your take on that, because I do think I want to say that my reason for saying that I think that there's more of a chance that something's happening is because I don't think you're going to see Sony put out a game that landed a little critically lower, to be fair. But let's just put two games that are games that we've been told are not getting sequels. They didn't move forward with them. The creative teams have moved on. They're doing different things. They're not making the Order 1886 remastered. And I'm not saying they should, but they're making Days Gone remastered. Now, if you ask me, the reason why that is because I think Sony even understands that while this may have been their worst performing new IP of the PlayStation 4 generation, sans the Order 1886,
Whoa.
Yeah, no. Once they moved into their latter half of the PS4 era, where they were doing a lot of new IP, Ghost of Tsushima outsold this. Horizon Zero Dawn outsold this. That's not bad things. Those are good games. They were good games, and I think that they deserve that. But the reality is that we still know without full certainty, we know that Days Gone sold somewhere in the ballpark of 8 to 10 million and has only probably sold more since then. And while that game did not necessarily get the critical response that they wanted and probably cost a little bit more and took a long time and probably some issues with the director and everything, I think they see that Days Gone still gets talked about often, much like The Order, but at a much higher magnitude. And I think that it's a more recent game. I think that they do have a team right now, Bend, that just got canceled off of a thing that they were doing and need something. Now, we've known this rumor for a long time. My question here, who's developing this? And they didn't say in the trailer. I'm curious if this is Bend Studio specifically, and it looks like it is. Bend Studio provides the first look at the remaster and gives new details. Okay. I cannot imagine why Bend Studio would be working on this unless part of what Bend wanted to do was reapproach Days Gone. I'm very curious to hear if you agree with that. To me, so it says with partners at Climax. No, okay, hold on. Partners at Climax Studios. Nope, never mind. Everything I said, wrong. Sorry. First sentence finally goes in. Bend Studio are partnering with them, but this is kind of like, Santa Monica partnering with the people that ported Ragnarok to PC. So that raises a lot of questions. Why do you, Chris, think that this is happening?
$10. Because that's the only real answer is that people. I've said this ad nauseum on this show. I think most of these are for trophy hunters, and they know that people are going to buy this to get their auto pops or to play it again or to buy the stuff. Or if they hadn't played it and they're not a trophy hunter, they're getting a new upgraded experience on the PS5 Pro I guess not, you know what I mean, on the PS5 of Days Gone, of a game that no matter how people plugged into the industry know they feel about it, they're going to pretend is the greatest thing since sliced. Well, they're going to pretend in their own minds, even though it is the greatest thing since sliced bread, they're going to be advertising it that way so people buy it. So this is just, it's the same thing of people going, well, Sea of Thieves has already sold through everything it's going to sell on Xbox, so why not put it on PlayStation?
Sure.
Why not upgrade it? Nobody's losing anything with this, whatever team this is that I've never heard of, and no offense to them, probably won't hear of after.
Yeah, fairly.
Is doing an update to a game I love. That's okay. There's no lost time for a Sony first party studio, right? And then it's one of these things you don't have to buy this. So it's really just an upgrade for the people that want it from a studio that affects nothing in the PlayStation ecosystem outside of the probably $2 million they were given to do it.
Yeah. Well, and this leads to my biggest curiosity here is as far as I can tell, we still don't have an actual price for the full, for what it's going to be without the upgrade fee. Or at least it didn't show it there. So now that I'm on the actual thing that we're looking at here, the PlayStation blog states that it's going to be $50, which I think is about, isn't that where the Horizon Remastered landed as well? Okay. So the interesting thing here is that, and this is one of my big curiosities, the Horizon Remastered was handled by Nixxes, and they made it a point to show off all the new technology and how they were bringing that game up to be more in line with its sequel. One of the things I find to be interesting here, this is not a slight, I love this game. This doesn't look to me any different than the PS4 version running on PS5 with the PS5 patch that they put to let it run at 60 frames per second and higher resolution. What outside of the new game modes, now that is where they focused a lot more time on. The Horizon Zero Dawn remaster did not get new game content. It just got new technology. This got new game content. And I would assume, I mean, what the fuck does graphical enhancements mean when you can't see much? But across the board, this doesn't look like the same amount of work from a technical standpoint, but it does seem like it might be from a game mode standpoint. So I guess my question is why do you think the approach was different? And I guess a tack onto that, are you actually interested in the new modes, or are they just
I don't know. I think I would imagine that a lot of this new content is just cut content. First of all, but it could have just been like this studio is just like, hey, we're working on this, we've got this, or maybe it's been on, it could be a situation like X-Men Origins where it was sitting on the shelf so long with just people working on it. They're like, oh, we came up with a new game mode. We made this game good,
Yeah.
which is what happened with X-Men Origins. So, I don't know. I don't necessarily know that there's like a big conspiracy on any of this, right? Like I think the new mode probably just came from the hordes are really cool. Let's upgrade the horde tech. Let's do more with the hordes.
Yeah, and you have more overhead on PS5 to push them further. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I could make an argument that the fact that they did do that to Days Gone 1 would be more of an indicator that they don't plan on doing a sequel. So they're like,
because
okay, we
they
don't
could have just added those into Days Gone 2.
Exactly. Or they were like, we built this tech, might as well use it for one last hurrah, right? There's so many options on why they would have added that. To me, it just seems like a cool mode that they already do kind of have this, to be clear. Like, have you played the Days Gone DLC of all the challenge modes?
No, I haven't played
a lot of this is
I haven't played Days Gone since launch. When I beat it in Platinum, I haven't played it all.
Well, I played it relatively recently. Like there's challenge modes, there's score attack modes. Like to me, this is just an added mode to that, and it's a cool mode. But this is stuff that's there. Sure. A lot of these challenge modes are there. It's kind of just like taking
something existing and expanding them out a little bit.
Yeah, and like I say, I don't know that there's any conspiracy on why they did this. Like I don't really have to put on like my Jim Ryan belt. Like it's $10. It's or $50.
Look, yeah, and I'm with you, but let me ask you this. Do you think it's crazy for someone to look at this and go, this is confusing messaging?
No. Or, well, yes, I guess. I mean,
I think I sympathize with the fact that if you were a fan of Days Gone and this happened, that you'd be excited because you get a chance to play again with a fresh coat of paint, and depending on how you bought it, maybe with a $10 fee, which is pretty easy. If not, the secondary version is that this is a way for, if this $50 version, even for people who aren't doing the $10 upgrade, or even with the $10 upgrade, if this sells a lot, you might actually convince Sony that there's something worthwhile here, which is an interesting prospect. But lastly, I do sympathize with the thought process that this does seem to indicate, because Sony's pushed a lot about how they want their things to have some kind of relevance. So I think the weirdest part of this is that this has not coincided with some announcement that there's going to be a Days Gone TV show or a movie or something, because that's where I could see it tying in, is their multimedia approach. Maybe they don't want to do anything with the game, but they own the IP and PlayStation Productions is popping off. Therefore, you could approach this as a PlayStation Productions show. And since we didn't get any of that yet, there's still time. Who knows what could happen? It does feel weird that this is happening because it doesn't seem to play into their interconnected thing, right? Like they talk about they want their products to be interconnected across all of their business models.
Sony is currently, as of August 19th, 2022, when this article was posted, the headline or the first paragraph, Sony has found a new potential video game movie franchise as a Days Gone movie starring Sam Hugan is in development. So yeah, there's a movie coming out.
And look, and I'm with you, but the only thing I'll say is that I haven't seen anything about that since then, and Sony's been pretty good about updating everything else. But to be fair to everything you're saying as well, like we know that the Horizon show went down. We've not heard a whole lot on the God of War show, so who knows? Maybe you're right, and maybe it's just maybe here in a few weeks or a few months, we'll be seeing the first trailer for that.
Maybe.
And it'll be a coincided thing of, hey, we want to release this as the buying in point for people who watch the show and or movie and say,
well,
hey,
and that makes
cool.
a lot of sense, because it's something I said to Blake when we were talking about this, is like, how is this not out right now? Why is this?
I was a little
April?
surprised that this wasn't a shadow drop for what it is.
Dude, I can't believe I would have quit. We wouldn't be recording if this was a shadow drop. Are you kidding? And like, I don't know why they would make me wait until April. That's crazy. So maybe there is something. I don't know. I guess I'm being a little cynical. The question that really need to ask is like, do you want a Days Gone 2? Because I want it in concept, but actually right now in this, I don't think I want a Days Gone 2 without John Garvin and the other guy. I'm sorry, I can't remember. Jake Rocket. I know he is on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah. Now that you said that, I can't think of his actual name, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I only know John Garvin's name because he's been very annoying. So it's like a matter of like, yeah, I'd love to see Days Gone 2, but without them,
Jeff Ross.
What is Jeff Ross? Without them, it's like, what's the point?
Well, and now we lead into a thing where kind of like what, was being said in the community's take, where it's like, definitely with Ready at Dawn being gone now. And I mean, you kind of are at the point where like Sony owns the order. And while I would love to see that franchise actually see the potential that it clearly has, be realized, I don't anticipate it, of course, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that I wouldn't be eager to see them try and do something with the franchise by handing it off to someone new. And I think Days Gone exists in a weird space right there where I would be excited to see them expand on it, but it is really difficult to be like, man, but if you don't have the core of the people who believed in the idea to get it going in the first place, is there a chance that you lose some of the spark? And you say that with anything, right? Like you can look at Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 and compare it to the newest Assassin's Creed.
Dragon
and they're
Age.
very, very, very different games. And Dragon Age, yeah, it's the same in name, it's different in spirit. Well, and that's even the same developer, but it's not the same team that made that series. So
I think
you're right. I mean, there's something to be said. You can ruin a franchise by bringing it back, arguably.
Yeah, and I think
it's Dragon Age is probably done for. I think we all know that.
Well, they said it. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I think I hold Days Gone in a different spot than something like The Order, and in my opinion on this, but I can't say why, so I'm not going to.
Well, and I only brought it up to bring up that they're equal franchise in the fact that Sony has pretty much outwardly said they have no intention of continuing them.
You know what happens at the end of Days Gone and what it means given the history of Bend, which is why I think it's significantly weirder to make that game without those two than it would be to make The Order 1886, which, while interesting, its setting is unique, but the story it's telling is relatively generic in a way, and not in an insulting way, but in a way that like I'm not super worried if someone else takes over werewolves versus colonial marines or whatever they were, but what happens at the end of that game and the history that it has with Bend,
which is interesting because while we're talking about this here, I won't say what it is either. John Garvin has specifically said he did not want that in the game.
Okay, then fucking bring it on. Then fuck him. Let's do it because that's great. That like got me hyped.
Because he said he did not want to cross-pollinate the universes.
Yeah, but it's okay. So we're not talking about.
Well, I think we're talking about we might be talking about different things. But I think I do. You're talking about the fact that it's tied into a different series.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And he has said that he wanted, even whenever he started to agree to it, he just wanted it to be like a little Easter egg nod, but he didn't really want it to go anywhere. So.
Oh, that was not an Easter egg nod, bro.
Yeah.
That was a full ass.
That was an Easter bunny.
you ever seen the end of Avengers or of Iron Man? It was that.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't really have much more to go on.
No, I'm good. I can't wait for Days Gone. All of these games look pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say Days Gone's Game of Show just because it is a known quantity. I'm very excited for it. I'm happy. I will definitely be playing it again. Be buying it day one. One of us will. Doesn't matter.
It'll be me. I'll already buy it.
Yeah. As far as, I don't know if I really want to throw a game at the show. I was just happy to walk away and have like at least 10 new games that I was like, this looks cool.
Ironically, part of why Days Gone is Game of the Show is because it's a known quantity. Like, I know that's a 10 out of 10.
I know I love it. Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for joining me. Went on a little bit longer, but you know what? The thing you need to know is play Days Gone. It's a great game.
Mm-hmm.
This is your chance. Prove to Sony to bring John Carvin back.
Don't bring John Carvin back. Bring the other guy back. Don't bring him back.
Maybe Jeff Ross. I think he went to NetherRealm. Interesting.
No, he's making Tomb Raider.
You're right. He went to
Crystal.
Crystal. Yeah. Interesting.
Doesn't mean you can't pry him away, but
yeah, anything's possible. All right, man. Well, until next episode, this has been Triangle Square, the PlayStation Podcast. If you want to join our patrons who went over to patreon.com/Nartech and gave as little as $1 per month to support the show, you can. And as always, we shout them out at the end of the episode for as a thank you for being able to keep doing the show. So without further ado, our newest patron, Mr. Low Rate Nate, join him if you'd like. We also have Duh Overlord, Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, Matt Tubbs, Easton328, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Danny Villobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Matthew Green, and Sean Santarud. Thanks to each and every one of you, and we will see you next time.